Yeah, we're live. Hi, guys.
To start feeling whole body better, start your day with Inner Health Probiotics. Better support your energy, your immunity, and digestion with 24-hour gut support. Better health starts with inner health.
It's time to kit up. We've dropped a new range of kits for maximum performance. New DeWalt kits available now.
Well researched man and written many books. I'm really pleased to have him on the show and conversate with today. But I'd like to welcome to the show for the first time, Josh Peck. Josh, thank you for joining us.
Hey, Diane. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here.
For those that are not familiar with you and your work, can you just give us a synopsis of your expertise and interests?
Sure. So I've been in full-time ministry for, how many years now? I think probably close to 10 altogether. I started off just doing my own thing, learning how to write a book. And, it was my first book and everything. And I self-published a bunch of books before going to Skywatch. Then I was there for 7 years and worked there. And then just recently, like you mentioned, I moved over to Prophecy Watcher. So, and I've been here for about 6 months, absolutely loving it. And so, yeah, that's just kind of like a really brief, my background. Yeah, it's been a wild ride, and I'm excited to see what the Lord has for the future.
Yeah, well, you're definitely inspiring for people, like me, that's like studying these subjects and just getting into podcasting and writing books and things like that. So, I mean, if you're definitely a inspiration for us, hey, us little guys can make it too, man.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, when I was first starting out, I was looking up to people like, L.A. Marzulli and Tom Horn and people like that. And so, and then having some other friends that were my age that I made just by doing interviews and stuff, that kind of gave me that feeling too. So I'm glad that I can inspire that and anybody else who wants to get into this kind of stuff.
Mm. Well, I've never heard the story, but I'd like to ask you this before we get started on our subject matter. Like, how did you get involved with Skywatch? How did that happen?
Yeah, well, it was actually Dr. Michael Lake. So I had 2 books out, Quantum Creation and Cherubim Chariots, which actually are still available, and we'll probably get into a lot of the content from those books in this interview. Both of those are still available now at prophecywatchers.com. Best place to get it. And I wrote those books to be timely, to be timeless. So the information that's in there, even though the books are a few years old, they're still relevant today. Anyway, I had just come out with Cherubim Chariots, and I was doing interviews for those. And Dr. Michael Lake invited me on. He had found my stuff just kind of on his own. And, I've heard of him because Skywatch had just started, and he was going to be one of the first guests. I think he might have been the first guest. It was either him or Sharon Gilbert, and then I was like the third one or something. But anyway, so he had me on. We did the interview, and then I guess I found out later, but I guess he actually took my books and gave them to Tom Horn and said, you need to read these and take a look at this guy. I think there might be something here. So Tom did, and I guess he was impressed with what he read. So he invited me to fly out and do an interview at Skywatch. And this wasn't a job offer yet or anything. This was just to fly out and do an interview. We ended up driving from Michigan to Missouri, which was a very long drive, and Christine and I were extremely poor at the time, so it took like every bit of gas money that we had to do it.
Hey, you got a strong marriage, man. Those cross-country trips, that tests the relationship right there, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. It certainly can. Yeah, we had a blast, and Skywatch put us up in a hotel and stuff, and so we did. I did the interview, and this was in the very early days of Skywatch, where they were considering just having Gary Stearman host the show, which didn't end up happening. They went with Derek because Prophecy Watchers and Skywatch are about 4 hours away from each other, so it's just Gary's not going to be driving 4 hours back and forth every week to do that. But for the first few episodes, Gary Stearman did the interview. So that was my very first television interview ever, and it's still online today. And it was a lot of fun, and it went really well. And so after that, me and Tom stayed in contact, and then just one day he sent me an email and he offered me and Christina both jobs at Skywatch. So of course we accepted because I was I had just come off of disability, so I was only doing I have a rare bone disease, and I've had to have a bunch of corrective surgeries and stuff, and it's a lot better now than it was back then. But so the only thing that I had for a living that I even could do was just ministry work. And so, of course, we jumped on the opportunity. We accepted the jobs and moved to Missouri, and then the rest is history. That's how all that happened. So thank you, Dr. Michael Lake.
Yeah, Michael, he's awesome. I actually talked to him just maybe a week or two ago on my other show that I do with my friends, the Dig Bible podcast, and we had him on. He's a great guy.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, he is. He's great.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, today, man, I just really wanted to dive into something that you're well familiar with and you've spoken on quite a bit, but I've not spoken with you, so I want to speak with you on it.
That sounds good.
Well, Phil, I just pressed your channel and you got no sound. You're right. Wow. You might have to start a new channel if you can't fix that. I'll plug it for you.
But the subject matter of CERN, and I've talked to some people that has, not written books on it, but had opinions on it and things like that. So I really wanted to get your expert opinion on it because you have well over, 10,000 plus hours on this subject and the things around it. But with that, there's always the conspiratorial talk, and you hear about the sacrifices and the Shiva dancing god of destruction out front, and that they're opening portals. And so this is definitely something that I want to pick your brain on and separate fact from fiction.
Yeah, definitely. We can start wherever you'd like. Do you want me to just explain what CERN is and how the LHC works and all that to start?
Yeah, that'd be good for those that just are not familiar with it. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So CERN it's a multinational government body, basically. It's an organization, and what they do, it's made up of physicists and scientists from all over the world. What they do is they basically decide what happens with.
Phil, I know this is a stupid question, but are you sure you had your audio turned up to full volume?
Yes, the Large Hadron Collider and other things too, but usually the focus is on the Large Hadron Collider. That's what most people are most interested in. And the Large Hadron Collider is basically just a particle collider. Biggest machine ever invented, as far as we know, by man. And it collides particles together, and then scientists are able to look at that explosion, look at the aftermath, I should say, of the particle collision. And in that aftermath, sometimes new particles show up. Not new as in they didn't exist before, but new as in we haven't discovered them yet. And the reason that it works like that, it's not that these two particles are crashing together and exploding and we're looking at the pieces of the particles. That's not exactly what's happening. The reason the machine works the way that it does is based around something called quantum field theory. And basically what it means is for every particle, there's an associated field from which that particle comes from. So gravitational fields, we know we have a gravitational field. The particle for that field would be the graviton. There's an electromagnetic field. The particle for that is the photon. So what it means is, and fields, they're everywhere, they're all over. When the field level is like set at 0, there's no particles. There's nothing happening. So in the electromagnetic field, it would be dark. When you turn on your light switch, you're actually you're exciting that electromagnetic field. You're making it vibrate and move, and that vibration is the photon. So when we think about CERN and LHC and how all this works, we have to think about particles totally different. They're not little tiny pieces of matter like most of us think. They're actually tiny vibrations in these quantum fields. And we actually know that to be absolutely correct, because if they were little tiny pieces of matter, the LHC wouldn't work. It wouldn't work the way it does. What's actually happening when those particles collide, they're sending the energy from that collision vibrates out into other fields that are around, other fields that we may not have discovered yet. So this most recent,
I love all this stuff on CERN.
Happened in 2012 when it was announced that they had discovered the Higgs boson. So basically what they did is they collided two particles together and they examined it, and then they saw that a Higgs boson popped up because that energy from that collision vibrated the Higgs field. That at that time was just theoretical. We didn't even know if that was real or not yet. But then they saw the Higgs boson. And they repeated the experiment over and over and over again to make sure that it was all accurate and it wasn't a fluke.
So is this like sonar, it sounds like?
As an example, you could think of it like that. Sound is more like pressure waves in the atmosphere, so it's not exact. But as an example, you could think of it that way. So every field that exists, it exists in all points of space at the same time. So that collision brings the particle into being by vibrating that field. And again, the vibration itself is the particle. So what's really cool about that is, like, even the particles in our bodies, like everything, and it's unfortunate because New Age latches onto this and then twists it into something it's not. But that aside, the particles that make up your body are just vibrations, really. And that's what makes up matter. And so it's really cool to think about it like that. And so the most accurate science that we have today is quantum field theory, and that's what it states. And they built the LHC around this theory, and the machine works. So we know that this quantum field theory, that this is the right description of the physical universe. So that's basically what they're doing. Now, there are some valid, some not valid. There are a lot of rumors about CERN and that they're doing this or that. CERN is so big. Excuse me. CERN is so big and full of so many people. I would be open to the idea. I wouldn't doubt that there's probably some people on top that could just be straight up Satanists. Could be. But you're going to get that anywhere. I mean, that's going to be anywhere. So, for example, you mentioned portals, and I get this question a lot. Can CERN open a portal? Well, that is actually, in a way, something that they're trying to do. So their science director, Sergio Bertolucci, that was his name. It took me a minute to remember. He went on record and he's quoted as saying something along the line, I don't have the exact quote, but something along the lines of, if we open a door to another dimension, unknown unknowns might come through. And they've had on their website this goal that they want to discover higher dimensions, and they want to actually probe and map higher dimensions somehow. And they're mostly thinking of doing that through these particle collisions, and that gets into the weirdness of gravitons. So the way that they would find out, one of the ways, there's different methods on how to discover a higher dimension, but one of the ways is gravitons. Even though we haven't discovered gravitons, we know they exist because there's a gravitational field, and every field has to have a particle. Gravitons, by what all the math predicts, should be able to travel to higher dimensions just on their own naturally. And that might be why gravity is so weak, because it's a big mystery in science. There's four main forces. There's the weak and strong nuclear force, electromagnetic force, and gravity. But gravity is so much weaker than those other three. And that's easy to demonstrate. Put a paper clip on the table and pick it up with a magnet. You know, that the entire Earth is pulling down on that paper clip, but a kitchen magnet can counteract that. So compared to the rest of the forces, gravity is incredibly weak. And one of the theories is that gravity is actually leaking into higher dimensions, and that could be why. So the way that they would find that out is they would look at these collisions, and when these collisions happen, the energy is spread out evenly. So if they find gaps where stuff should be, where energy, where vibrations or whatever, where it should be, if they find gaps, then that's a good indication that that's where gravitons were, but they flew into a higher dimension. So that's one way that they're trying to make this discovery. And there's others as well. So the idea, can CERN open a portal? I mean, technically, yes, but there's some things that we have to look at. First, most of the scientists, I would say 99% of the scientists there are just there for science. I know a couple of them myself. There's Christians that work there. CERN on its own isn't like, it's not like everybody there is just pure evil. Most people, if there is anything evil going on there, most of the scientists don't even know about it, or they're just not involved with it at all. Now, as far as the portal idea, the machine, the way that it works right now, is very similar. It's actually exactly the same as what happens in our atmosphere every day. So we have cosmic rays coming into our atmosphere all the time. And because of that, we have constant particle collisions all throughout our atmosphere all the time. So that's the only thing that the LHC is doing. It's doing just that, but it's just more measured and precise. But it's so they can actually look at it. But it's the same thing. So if somebody wants to think that CERN is opening a portal right now, based on the information we have, they would have to also accept that portals are being opened in our atmosphere all the time, all over the place, for all time. It's always been happening. So, you know, I mean, it would be millions and millions of portals every single day. What's one more, you know? So there is that aspect to it. Now, it could change if they do routine like upgrades and stuff. There's also been plans like in China that they want to build a particle collider that I think is like 20 times more powerful than the LHC. And it could be when they get into those higher power levels, if they surpass what's happening.
I saw that on our news, Diane, because that's not far from us. So it's a French protectorate, I think. There was a bad earthquake
in the atmosphere, then we'll be in unknown territory. But as far as right now, no, that's not happening. And then somebody might say, well, they're just not telling us. Maybe they are doing these experiments and they're just not telling us. Well, you have a problem because it takes a lot of people to run this thing. Yeah, you would have to keep everybody quiet. I mean, it wouldn't happen. And this also is a government-run thing, and government's not great at like keeping. I mean, you can tell. I don't
know about that. The Manhattan Project with the atomic bomb, that was super secret, and it didn't get out.
When you listen to a politician, if they're lying or not, they're not good at it. I don't think that any government would be. I think they're too inept to be able to keep something like that secret, and for what purpose? Now, there are ways in which CERN could be used nefariously, and one of them is with extra-dimensional communication. This is something that is possible, and they've been open about. The things that people want to say CERN is doing and they're keeping secret, they wouldn't. They wouldn't have any need to keep it secret, because with something like I'm about to tell you, they've been open about this for over 10 years, this communication thing. It's been on science programs. They're open with their stuff, you know. There are weird things like that ritual that I can talk about in a minute, but as far as actually using the machine for some purpose, they're very open about it, and they kind of have to be, because so many people work there, and they're not going to be able to keep everybody secret. And it's multinational, so you got all these other countries involved. You're not going to be able to keep all that secret. But what they have been, like what we know, what they are open about. There is one thing that they will keep secret, though. They don't keep it secret forever, but there's a good reason they do this. So the Higgs boson was actually discovered 6 months before it was announced. And the reason for that is everything in quantum physics is based on percentages. So if you have one collision and you see something that looks funny, but it never happens again, that probably was a fluke. It's either the machine didn't read it out right, or just some weird quantum thing happened and it's a fluke and it doesn't mean anything. That kind of thing happens regularly. So when they make a discovery, they have to test it again and again and again for months to really bring up those percentages as high as they possibly can, to where they're comfortable saying, yes, this is a real discovery. Because once they announce that, other labs around the world are going to try to replicate that. And if they're wrong, they're going to be really embarrassed. So
Right.
So with that, the Higgs boson discovery, they did keep that secret, but it's for a good reason. And they wanted to have time to, repeat the experiments and stuff. So that, as far as I know, that's the only thing that they really can keep secret, because that's something that every physicist in the world would agree with. Yeah, let's not put this out in the public until we know for sure. So anyway, the communication thing. So the idea is, if and when we discover gravitons, when we figure out how to do that and what conditions to do that, we'll be able to manipulate gravitons. We can already manipulate particles now. Physicists can entangle two particles. They can do whatever they want. They can alter the spin. So the idea is to manipulate a string of gravitons and affect the spin of certain ones. So, it might be like up, spin up.
That's crazy that we've got the science that can do that. That's stunning.
Down, down, up, whatever, for like a Morse code. And then send the gravitons, which they naturally can do on their own anyway, send it to a higher dimension, and then set up a type of receiver, or set up some type of detector to see if anything comes back. And they've been talking about this for well over 10 years, probably a lot longer. The first I heard about it was about 10 years ago. So I know that that's something that they're either actively working on, or, well, they're definitely actively working on discovering gravitons. Whoever discovers a graviton, it's surefire they're winning the Nobel Prize. It's like the holy grail of quantum physics. And that if and when that happens, it'll be huge news for a long time. It'll be a bigger discovery than the Higgs boson, and that was really big news in 2012. So once they can do that, though, that's when I'm going to be like really, really paying attention to what they're using this new knowledge for. And I believe if they're going to set up a communication system, I believe they will be open about it, because they don't really have a reason not to be. They don't care what us conspiratorial Christians think about what they're doing. They don't care.
Right.
They want Nobel Prizes and they want funding, and they have to be open about what they're doing in order to get all that. Otherwise, their funding dries up. And communicating with an extra dimension is going to be extremely exciting for the people.
Diane, people are saying them drones are looking for suitcase nukes. That's pretty much, that's in a lot of things on YouTube today.
People who are going to be funding these projects. So once that discovery happens, and there's no way that they would make that discovery and keep it a secret forever. They might wait a little while, a few months, to make sure it's real, but the allure of a Nobel Prize would be too tempting to just keep that a secret. So it will eventually. Egos. Yeah, exactly. And so it will eventually come out. They may have already discovered it, and we just don't know yet, and they're just testing to make sure. That very well could be. So once that happens, once that discovery is made, I'm going to be really looking at what representatives from CERN are saying about what they're going to do with that, because I bet top on the list would be this extra dimensional communication device thing. Now, to me, if that happens, I've theorized, well, could that be what initiates Revelation 9? Could that be, because in a sense, think about it, it's just a more scientific way to pray to, to petition to ancient false gods. That's from the biblical perspective, that's what they would be doing. I believe that there are extra dimensional entities, but I believe they're fallen ancient, angels, like they're fallen angels and stuff. The false lower G gods. An angel of God isn't going to answer that. Like an obedient angel isn't going to answer that, because this way of communicating it's prohibited. You're not supposed to be praying to false gods, and that's what praying is. You're talking to an extra dimensional being of some kind, So I've kind of thought, I wonder if it's going to get to the point, because ultimately people are going to chase their false gods. And we know that this has happened in the past, like the Tower of Babel incident, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, and this gets into Deuteronomy and like a bunch of stuff, but the basic story is during the Tower of Babel incident, what a lot of people miss is when God scattered the nations, these false angels, these false gods, these fallen angels that these people that were building the tower were worshiping, they became over the people. That's why we have all these false religions, and then God kept Israel. But that's why we have all these false religions around the world. So you have people that are continuing to follow these gods and trying to reach out to them, and that's why I say I'm sure for a few people that are on the top, that probably is their goal. They're not all atheists. There's a lot of them that believe in like the Indian epics and stuff like that. So that's why that Shiva statue is out there. It was a gift, and it's about the destruction of the universe and everything.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of symbolism there. I'm not saying CERN's trying to destroy the universe, but at least the person that gifted that to CERN, and I forget his name, I have it in my book, but clearly there's some part of him that believes this stuff. And so there's going to be other people just naturally that believe in this stuff. So they're reaching out to these false gods. And I think there could be a time where God says, okay, you don't want me, you want these guys, you think they're going to treat you right? You got them. Let's see how they treat you. And maybe that's Revelation 9, when God finally has enough and the bottomless pit is opened and these horrible cherubim things come out. These fallen angels come out and attack the non-believers. I think that that could be a result of things they're trying to do now.
So the audio's fine, Phil. There you go, mate.
Now, I don't think we're going to wake up tomorrow
Good news about Hunter. So your sound's back, Phil?
and the bottomless pit is going to be open. I believe in the tribulation, rapture, all that stuff's got to come first. But, and I know not everybody agrees. That's totally fine. But I think that what's happening now could potentially maybe lead to the fulfillment of Revelation 9. So we'll see what happens with this communication thing. But people who are listening, keep your eyes on. If you hear that the graviton was discovered, keep your eyes on CERN and see what they're doing. And I will too, and I'll report as best as I can on it.
And I'm glad you explained everything, because I'm a layman. And so I'm so glad that you took the time to explain, the frequencies and sending out these frequencies and finding these things. That's kind of what they're doing. And it makes more sense to me now, because that Shiva statue, she is he or she, whatever, but it dances and holds creation together. And when she stops dancing, that is the end of time. And it's like, I've heard it explained, she's dancing to what's his name, talked about the music of the spheres, the silent song that plays, that holds everything together. So it makes sense that they're actually making frequencies and she's dancing to them. But I had Putty Putman on. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's got a degree. He's a pastor, but he's got a degree in quantum physics. And I just kind of asked him about CERN. And he said, we all have our lenses. He said, and I've not really taken a deep, dive into CERN. He said, but just from my point of view, he said, from a scientist's point of view, he said, that doesn't have a religious connotation to it. He said, us as Christians, we look at things in a spiritual way. He said, scientists don't. He said, he said, maybe, he said, the guy that created the atom bomb, he said he had a famous quote and said, I have become death itself. And he mentioned like the Shiva, the destroyer. He said, so maybe, he said that was kind of like a salute to him, as far as like a science mind goes.
Yeah, exactly. And I fully agree with that. Like, most of the scientists there are just looking at it scientifically. They're not looking at any of this other stuff. And then, weird things happen. Like, there was this murder ritual thing, and we still don't know all the details of that. But there was a video that came out a few years ago, and I wrote about it in my book. But where it showed a parody of a ritualistic, like, cult murder, like a sacrifice, like a human sacrifice. And that blew up. That went viral, and a lot of people thought it was real at first. It's not real. Nobody actually died. It was a parody, but in dark occult magic circles, a parody can be just as good as the real thing with whatever they're trying to do. So we still don't know if it was if it was an actual parody ritual for.
It looked legit to me at the time.
For occult purposes, or if it was just some people doing it as a joke. But here's the weird thing: if it was just a joke and there wasn't anything to it, why didn't we hear who did it and that they got fired? Because that should have been a big embarrassment on CERN. Like, I would imagine if it was just some young scientists or something that were like an internship or something there, and they did that, I would imagine, like, if I was running CERN, I would say, make them public, show their faces, show who they are for everybody, so we can assure everybody that a murder didn't happen, and fire them publicly.
Yeah.
I mean, that seems like it seems like that would be the thing.
Sorry? Righto.
To do, to just show everybody, like, hey, we're not trying to hide anything. There was no murder, but we didn't hear anything about it after. And so that to me was always weird, that there was no real resolution, and CERN just kind of let it peter out and didn't say anything about it, as far as I know. At least not anything towards getting any real answers. So to me, if it was this like dark magic parody occult thing, I could see why they might want to keep that quiet. If it was just a dumb joke, I don't see why they would at all. I mean, we're constantly seeing in the headlines stuff like that. I mean, recently somebody for a TikTok video, which just was really stupid, but somebody put something on a railroad track to cause a train to derail, and then like filmed it as if it was just like happening by chance. He got caught and arrested. He's in a bunch of trouble now. But we're constantly, and they made him public. We're constantly.
Geez, that's pretty bad, making a train derail and filming it. Wow.
Constantly seeing headlines like that when people do dumb stuff like that, they're made public. But for some reason, not with that CERN thing, not with that murder parody thing. You would think that would if it was just a joke. So I don't know what to do with that one. It's definitely weird. I know me and Tom wrote a book a few years ago about it called Abaddon Ascending, which I don't think is in print anymore, and I don't know why. But that book, we talk about that, and I know that Tom believed it was a Tom Horn. He believed it. My co-author of that book. He ran Skywatch, for those who might not be familiar with who Tom Horn was, but he passed away recently. But in that book, he wrote a lot about, like, he believed that was a dark magic parody thing. He didn't think that was a joke or anything at all. He fully believed that. So he wrote quite a bit about that. So I tend to lean towards that way of looking at it. I think it probably was an attempt. I don't know if it actually worked or did anything, but I think that it was probably an attempt by certain occultists there, and they might not even have been high level in CERN, who knows, to try to do something. What I don't know. Do a parody sacrifice to some false lower G god that they worship. I have no idea, but that's about the extent that I know of that parody ritual thing. But yeah, it's just, so every once in a while we get weird stories like that from CERN that make me think, so something's up there.
And then that Reddit story too that was going around a while back, and it was saying that, I can't remember if it was high school kids or college kids, but they actually done like a tour for a school or something like that, and that they toured the facility, and this student was taking pictures, and that he or she got a picture of this glass case and with a document in it, and I think they said that it was like lambskin parchment or something, old school like that, and had all this cryptic writing and stuff on it, and they snapped a picture of it, and it went online, and people were saying that it was communication from the other side, and then all of a sudden that picture was wiped off the internet. You couldn't find it anywhere, but I know it was a big discussion, like going around on Reddit and stuff a few years ago. Did you hear of that?
No, I haven't. I've actually missed the whole Reddit train. Once it came out, I already had the things that I was using, and I was already starting to get to the point where it's like I don't want to learn a new thing. And so far, I just haven't. So I'm totally clueless on anything that happens on Reddit. I actually had not heard that story before, so that I'll have to look into that. Yeah, I don't know anything about that one. That sounds weird though.
Yeah, and it's hard to separate fact from fiction, especially nowadays, because you got people doing things on purpose for clicks and
Misdirection,
TikToks and making these fake AI pictures. I mean, we've never been able to get information so freely now, but there's so much, just dung that's mixed in with it. It's hard to separate it sometimes, especially with all the technology.
Yeah, and I think that's just going to get worse. I mean, it's to the point now that a video of something just isn't proof anymore, because they're so easy to fake. Like, we have more UFO videos now than we ever have before, but it's like, yeah, but most of those are probably fake. Whereas, in the 60s, 70s, whatever, that would have been a lot harder to fake back then, but we still at least had video cameras, but they also weren't that good because it was 50 years ago. So it's like the better technology gets, the easier it is for people to lie to each other. And I think we're going to keep seeing that. I mean, we see it in news stories, and that's why we got to be, especially with CERN, we got to be like real careful with this kind of stuff. When you have a topic that just naturally invites conspiracy stuff, and there are, and I don't use that derogatorily, to an extent, I'm a conspiracy theorist myself, but I think that as conspiracy theorists, we really have to look at things carefully and logically, and we can't just buy into anything that we read somewhere, because it's so easy to fake. And why wouldn't somebody fake it if they can get views, if they can get clicks, if they can get people to look at their articles so they can get ad revenue from it? Of course people are going to do that. So there's a ton of misinformation around CERN, but that's not to say that everything CERN does is great. That's not to say that there's not some demonic influence happening there. There very well could be. But we have to look at this. So like the portal thing, I mean, that's a pretty easy one to debunk. It's like, even if they are, it's happening all around our atmosphere anyway. So it's not, what is it going to do? Now that, again, like I mentioned, that could change if they upgrade the machine, if they start getting into wanting to create black holes and things. That's different. Like a black hole is totally different than just a particle collision. I don't believe that just a particle collision is going to create a portal. Like, I just don't think that's happening. It's not like a portal to where and why. Like, why would that rip the barrier between the third and the fourth spatial dimensions? Like, it just, that doesn't make sense to me. If they start getting into black hole territory and they start being able to stabilize them, the idea is, we wrote about this in Abaddon Ascending as well. The idea is, black holes are obviously very dangerous, but the idea is, if you can create a black hole, and if you can control the spin in a way that counteracts the crushing gravity, so it's basically like gravity against like centrifugal force. I mean, it's like how the moon orbits the Earth, but the Earth doesn't pull the moon down. It's because the centrifugal force is making the moon want to go out to space by spinning, but gravity is pulling it in, so there's a place of equilibrium. I mean, it's like, if you take a yo-yo on a string and whip it around, it's the same thing. So the idea is, if you can do that with a black hole, with its spin, you might be able to stabilize it so it doesn't have this crushing gravity. And then that might be a portal. If they start messing around with black holes, then these people that are saying that they're creating portals might be onto something. That would be the point where I'd be like, okay, if they're, and they would be open and public about this. They're not going to hide it. But if they create a black hole and can adjust the spin to counteract the gravitational forces in there, then yeah, where does that black hole lead? And that's like the big question everybody wants to know. So that,
wow,
absolutely, that could be a portal to a higher dimension. I mean, black holes are so destructive. I could see something like,
geez, that made a mess of his foot, didn't it?
that tearing a hole in a dimensional barrier. I don't see that with just a particle collision, because we would have that all the time. I mean, we would constantly be inundated with things from the fourth spatial dimension. It would be obvious. We would see it all the time, and we'd be able to measure it. But we don't. So I don't think particle collisions themselves can create, just by itself, the way they're doing it now, can create a portal. But if they really ramp up the power and really ramp up the energy, and they can slam those particles together even harder to create a rip, to create a black hole, then yeah, then we might be in CERN's creating a portal territory.
And I got two questions for you from your perspective, because
Sure.
I know I've heard a lot of people comment and say, the more active, CERN gets, the more crazy and weird the skies get.
That's true.
And sometimes you have storms and hurricanes and things like that, associated close time frames within their activation. And then also, do you think that there is some people calling the shots that kind of poke, at us conspiracy theorists sometimes? Because if not, it's very strange coincidences, especially like our last eclipse that we had. There's lots of people freaking out, talking about, end of days, end of the world. And it was a sign from the book of Revelation, and, judgment of God, all this kind of talk. And then, boom, they decide to generate on the day the eclipse happens, and everybody's already freaking out anyway, thinking the world's going to end. So it's like, if they're not trying to harness some kind of power or do something, supernaturally or something like that, in the very least, their timing sucks, or it's really great timing and they're doing it to poke at us,
Oh yeah, I could absolutely see that. They're human beings, and I could absolutely see somebody doing that just to get us riled up, or just to, even just to get CERN in the news. Because it's like, if I'm running CERN and if I'm not a Christian, I know that I could run an experiment, because it's all about funding. They want to gin up excitement, because the more CERN is in the news, the more they can get funding from their donors and things. Because it's like, hey, it's a hot topic. Like, we should invest money in this kind of thing. So if I'm running CERN and I know that I have this particle collision that I want to do, am I going to do that on just a normal day, or am I going to do that on a day where I know it's going to get news stories, and I know that the conspiracists are kind of going to do my advertising for me, and they're going to spread the information everywhere, and everybody's going to be talking about CERN? Well, of course, I'm going to do it on the day of the eclipse, where something like that's going to happen. So I could absolutely see, and it's probably nothing more than just that. Because there are people that are thinking, well, it's this ritual, it's this thing. Maybe, maybe, but I more likely, just because we know how people are. Most likely, I think that they chose that just because they knew that it would really hit the news cycle, and it would get people talking, and it would get everybody would be talking about CERN again and again. It all goes back to money. It all goes back to funding and stuff. So, and then your other question about the weather. Well, I guess I would go back to, if CERN was doing something that affected the weather should have already been affected, because of all the particle collisions that are happening every day in our atmosphere. And it should have already been affected even more than what CERN could do, because CERN is like under the ground. Obviously, weather, hurricanes, that stuff happens in the air. Well, all these particle collisions are happening every day, and have been since the beginning of time. So I personally haven't seen, I'm open to it, but I personally haven't seen any evidence to show that CERN is doing anything that even could affect the weather. There are other things that very well could be, but I don't think CERN's one of them. It affects CERN. The LHC affects things on such a quantum scale. It's like, it's smaller than microscopic. It's inconceivable. Like, we can't even conceive how small this is. It's such a small scale. It doesn't affect anything. It wouldn't be able to create a hurricane, like one particle collision, or even if they did 1,000 a day. Like, they're never going to be able to surpass unless if they increase the energy. But at the energy that they have right now, which I believe is 14 TeV or something, I'd have to look at it again. But based on the energy that they have now, it's not enough energy to surpass what's happening all around the world all the time in our atmosphere from cosmic rays. So to me, I mean, like, could it? Yeah, I mean, of course, there's always a possibility that something could happen, but I haven't seen really any evidence. Definitely not enough to convince me. I haven't seen any evidence that CERN's doing anything that would affect the weather. But that could be. I mean, I'm open to it, so we'll have to just keep our eyes on it and see what happens.
So you're saying it's like Jim Carrey in Dumb and Dumber. You're telling me there's a chance.
Yeah. In quantum physics, there's always a chance. Yes.
Well, one thing too I want to pick your brain on was the location. There's this guy, you know, he calls himself, I can't remember his name, but his channel is called The Trumpet. And he uses Ezekiel 33:3, you know, when I see the sword fall upon the land, I'll blow the trumpet. And he talks about the location of CERN and how, you know, in the Bible it says that this is where Satan's throne is. And then, you know, the actual, I can't remember the martyr's name, but, you know, the martyr that died, and it said that he died in this land where this throne of Satan was. And then I've heard you guys talk on Skywatch about, I believe it was Skywatch, about how they built this on a location that was a temple to Apollyon.
Yes. Okay. So yeah, I don't know about the throne of Satan thing, because isn't that in Revelation? Isn't that in Pergamum or something? I'd have to look at it again. But no, on that second point, 100%. So whether they knew or not, that's up for debate. But regardless if they knew it or not, they built the LHC in what seems like the most inconvenient place. Like it borders two countries, France and Switzerland. And when they were building it, when they were digging for the tunnels for this, they actually had to stop construction because they found Roman ruins. And as it turns out, that area used to be it was a Roman settlement, and they worshipped Apollyon, and they believed that that's where the bottomless pit was. Like that's where they believed it existed. And to me, that's almost too coincidental. That's like, okay, either demonic forces inspired people to do that, and the people had no idea what they were doing when they picked that location, maybe, or the people knew that the history of that area and knew that ancient people worshipped Apollo, and they knew the connection to the bottomless pit, and they're thinking, hey, you know, we're going underground and portals and things. And so I don't between those two extremes, like I don't know where like it falls in line, but that absolutely is the history of that area, which is creepy and weird, and it just brings us right back to Revelation 9 again. So yeah, that's another piece of evidence where if it turns out CERN has something to do with the fulfillment of Revelation 9, it really wouldn't surprise me. It might not be that, but if it does, I mean, that's just another piece of evidence showing that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I like your perspective too. It could very well be that they are looking to make splashes and waves and get funding, and what a better place to build this than over the you know, the temple of Apollyon and the bottomless pit, and get all the Christians worked up. And yeah, we'll definitely make a big splash with this one.
Yeah, exactly. And so we never know people's motivations, but when I see something like that, it's like, okay, that's a little too coincidental. I mean, they could have built that anywhere, literally anywhere they could have built it. And there's probably a lot better places that they could. I mean, on the border of two nations, it's what a weird decision. But again, and then it just so happens that that place was dedicated to Apollo, and they believed the bottomless pit was there, and they venerated Apollo and all that. Too much to be just a coincidence. I think there was some kind of motivation behind the scenes there.
Yeah, definitely. That's why I say it's just so fascinating for me, because it's, you know, you have the spiritual side and scientific side, but man, there's definitely some cross pollination, and I'm just kind of standing there like, you know, that's why I bring people like you on, to try to get a better perspective of that other side.
Totally understandable. Well, and the good thing about it too, because you mentioned earlier that you're a layman. I'm a layman too, and so what I do in my books, all of this stuff is available for people to understand. The problem is a lot of scientists and physicists hide behind a really complicated way of speaking. It's almost another language. So then when normal layman people like me and you try to look into quantum physics, it's really, really difficult because you almost have to learn a new language. Well, in my early time in ministry, I actually had the time to do that because I didn't have a job. I was on disability. And so I had the time to actually learn that language. And like once I did, and I just read more books, saw more programs, it's like, oh, these concepts are actually accessible to everybody. It's just these scientists don't know how to explain it, you know, because they're used to talking to each other and they all talk like that. So when they have to talk to lay people like us, they don't know how to do it, and it's lost on us. And then that also breeds all sorts of conspiracy theories. One good example, when a scientist say that there's a chance something could happen, he means something totally different than we do. When we say that, we're like, yeah, could happen, maybe not, 50-50. When a scientist says that, a scientist will say that about anything, because in physics, literally anything is technically possible. So there was a story that went out because somebody, I don't know exactly how it happened, but some scientist or some physicist went on the record and said, answered a question or something and said that, yes, there's a chance that the LHC could open a black hole that would swallow the Earth. He doesn't mean, when he says that, he doesn't mean like, and that story blew up. I mean, it freaked a lot of people out. But when a scientist says that, he doesn't mean like, yeah, it could happen, maybe, maybe not, 50-50. He doesn't mean it the way we mean it. A scientist can't really say there's no chance that anything's going to happen. They just can't say that because there's always a chance. But the chance is so...
There's a 10% chance of atom bomb in World War II would have chain reacted and destroyed the whole world. There's a 10% chance of that, and they still went ahead with the explosion. Isn't that crazy, guys?
Incredibly, incredibly small that it just won't happen. Like it's a kind of different way of thinking. So it's like, well, it's you know, we might put the word technically in front of it. Technically, there's a chance. Technically, there's a chance I could spontaneously combust if I have one more drink of my coffee. I'm still going to drink my coffee. You know, the chance is so small, but is it technically possible? Yeah. But so they're meaning it like that. So, but the entire way they speak and think is like that. So they're just very different in how they reason and in the words they use than we are. So once I just studied and really looked into it, because it is fascinating to me, and I kind of learned that language, I thought, oh, I can write books and explain all this stuff to lay people so they don't have to learn this language like I do, and then it's accessible. So that for most of my ministry career has been built on that, especially when it comes to the quantum physics stuff. I do it a little bit with like theological things too, but especially with the quantum physics stuff, I like taking things that seem complicated and me knowing that they're actually not. The concepts themselves, at least, they're not complicated. Anybody can understand it, given enough time and the right explanation. I like taking that stuff and then just breaking it down and making it as simple as possible for everybody else. Because I ultimately am a layman too, and I want to know what's going on. So that's a big part of my ministry, and I hope my books do that. And again, I should mention one more time, if people are interested in this kind of stuff, the best resources that I could point to of mine are Quantum Creation and Cherubim Chariots for this kind of thing. It's all about quantum physics and how it connects back to the ancient false gods, and I get into all that. So those are available at prophecywatchers.com in a package, and I would highly suggest people get it there because Jeff Bezos doesn't need your $20. You know, why support Jeff Bezos even more when you can support an awesome prophecy ministry that's really doing a lot of good work in the world? So get it at Prophecy Watchers if you're gonna get those books at all.
Yeah, Bezos, he's good. He's good, bro. Which I was going to ask you too, because you had mentioned it, and the Tower of Babel.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe that, you know, CERN could be a potential just modern version of the Tower of Babel? Because I know some people, you know, theorize that this was a building not about height. You know, it was about maybe opening this portal to this other, you know, realm where these fallen angels were imprisoned in the abyss, and God shut that down.
Absolutely, yeah, and now some people take it too far and they say that the Tower of Babel was a particle collider. No. We are talking about two essentially different worlds here. So back then, it was a different world than it is today. Back then, occultic magic actually worked, and I mean, it's in the Bible. We read about that with Pharaoh. The Pharaoh's magicians could do things that we can't do. And there's a good reason for that. And we're told that in the Bible. The reason is because now the Holy Spirit is dwelling in believers. The Holy Spirit is here, and it really tamps down the kingdom of darkness's power. So now magic doesn't work the same way that it used to. So in the Tower of Babel, they didn't need technology or anything. And yeah, I do believe that they were, and this comes from extra biblical texts, but I do believe most likely what was going on, it wasn't about the height, because I mean, we have really probably towers that are higher than that now, and we send stuff into space and God's not confusing our languages over it. But it was more about the motivations of the people. God told them to scatter out. They decided they're not going to do that. They're all going to clump together. But apparently what was going on is, from what we can piece together from some of these extra biblical sources, Nimrod was ginning up the fear of these people, saying that God's going to send a flood again. And so what we need to do is we need to build this tower so we can get into heaven and we can kill God and set up our idols in the heavenly throne room. And they're not going to do that by physically building a high tower. There was occult practices going on. They were going to open a portal in a way with occult magic in that way. They didn't need technology. Well, now that the Holy Spirit, and so we know how the story ends, God shut it down and scattered everybody. Well, now we live in a time where magic like that just doesn't really work anymore because of the presence of Holy Spirit-filled believers, the Holy Spirit on the earth. And it's interesting, we even have ancient records of early Christians that would go around, and it's even in the Bible too, Paul did this, but would go around to these oracles and would shut it down. And they, like Apollo, there's the ancient church father, Lactantius. He recorded the story of how they were speaking to Apollo, essentially. But Apollo, he kept tripping up his words. He kept admitting he was a demon. Like, he kept admitting that, like, on accident. He was trying to boast himself up by saying he was all powerful and the true God, but then he would say, "Call me, O demon." Like, it was like in the presence of these spirit-filled believers, he couldn't even lie anymore. Like, and then eventually he couldn't even talk. He just stopped talking, and as far as we know, it's been absolutely silent ever since for 2,000 years. So there's something about that. So now the enemy has to do something different. Okay, the magic stuff isn't working. Well, technology. Maybe we can do it through technology. So yeah, I do believe that the enemy, the spiritual enemy, could very well be putting ideas in people's heads at CERN.
Hello, Ray from the concrete. Welcome to the channel.
Technological advances, and I'm not saying all technology is evil or anything. It depends on how you use it, but it is weird to me that we didn't have this stuff for thousands of years, and now all of a sudden in the past, I mean, it was only, a couple hundred years ago that we're still riding around on horses. Yeah. And now in a really short amount of time, and this could have happened at any time. I mean, we're basically the same kind of people. We have the same resources available. We have the same metals. Like, this could have happened 500 years ago. Why not? But it didn't for some reason. But now it is. And I think I think part of it is prophetic. I think, in a sense, some people will say, like, the veil is thinning. And I think as we progress further on and as we get closer to the end, I think this kind of stuff is going to explode more and more and more. We're going to see a lot more. And we have. I mean, the technological advancements we have are just absolutely insane. Like brain chips and all sorts of stuff, and particle colliders. And
you see the video of Elon Musk's party? Those robots that were going around serving drinks, playing paper, rock, scissors, and everything else. I mean, that's kind of cool, but at the same time, it's kind of disturbing too.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we're going to see more and more of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, Josh, thank you, brother. I really appreciate you coming on. I want to be respectful of your time. I tell a lot of these guests, man, I read y'all's books and listen to you guys talk, and I love these conversations, and I could easily
Okay, I enjoyed that. I like anything on CERN. Hang on, move. Come on. Jump, jump, jump. Leave me halfway.
Here's the answer code.
You're the man! Been looking for this for weeks.
Thank you guys for watching Now You See TV. This is your host, John Pounders, and we have John Hall, our co-host, and David Hall, our Saturday Night Normal. And so we are prepared for tonight. This tonight's going to be an awesome show. And we were going to do another show, but I got a hold of Timothy Alberino today, actually, while we were doing another show on True Frequency Radio. And I was like, hey guys, you guys want to have Timothy Alberino on tonight? And you both chimed in yes as quick as you could. So we're excited to have him tonight.
Book him!
Book him.
Book him!
So it's really cool. And for all you guys in the chat room, shalom to all of you guys. I get ready to get in there and start talking here in a minute. And for those of you that are listening live on YouTube, if you'd like to field questions to Timothy here in a little while, or if you just like to have a good fellowship chat, we moderate the chat that we have inside Now You See TV. There's a link in the description of the video that will take you right to our chat in our room where you can stream the video from there as well. And so if you do that, I don't know how well it does on a cell phone, but I know if you're on a PC, that's the way to go. So John, if you don't mind, in the YouTube chat, if you get a chance, put the link to the channel in there, and that way they can get in, because like I said, we don't moderate the YouTube chat. There's bound to be many trolls in the YouTube chat. There's no doubt about it. So make sure you guys check it out. And I just want to say that most of you guys that I think are on our channel know who Timothy Alberino is. In fact, you guys have been requesting us have him for a long time. I keep seeing, before I even knew who he was, I see his name pop up over and over and over again for you guys suggesting that we add him to our show, to do a show with him. So, but for those of you that don't know him, he's a researcher, writer, just an adventurer. He's been doing this for a while. He been working in Peru. He's has a wide variety of interests, including ancient histories, occult, Bible prophecy, genetics, ufology, cryptozoology, and he's also works with Steve Quill. And I think most of you guys probably know exactly who Steve Quill is as well. And he just got done with a new documentary that is absolutely amazing. And I can say this, that is probably one of the best. It's over 2 hours long. It's awesome. I was watching it, refreshing myself on it today, watching it, and I can tell you that it's really, really well done. They got into a lot of situations there, a lot of places, and just really impressive documentary.
Yeah, we downloaded it off Vimeo today, man. As soon as you got done talking to him, it's like Patty was in there ordering up on Vimeo. I was like, yes.
And shortly after that, he sent us the link to get it for free. So
I was like, what? That's all right, man. It was worth it
to support stuff like that. So I mean, I'd rather pay for it anyway. I really think that we should support the people that are out there doing this research, because I can tell you this, that there's not many people willing to do it, and if they are, they're not willing to go to the links that they went to do this stuff. So absolutely amazing. And we have David Carrico on with us too, and he's always on us with us Saturday nights, so he's really interested in talking to Timothy as well. And it's just going to be an awesome show. Like I said, if you're in the YouTube chat and you'd like to join us over on Now You See TV chat, where we moderate it, no trolls, we'll kick them right out and ban their IP. So come on, and if you're a troll, don't come over unless you want your IP banned, and you won't be able to come on anymore.
Yeah, I'm posting that link over there right now, so it's in there, guys. So come on over. If you got any questions or comments, please join us live here in the chat room on Now You See TV.
Definitely. So welcome, Timothy, to the show, man. We're so thankful to have you.
Hey, gentlemen, good evening. Nice to meet you in cyberspace.
Yeah, this is about the best way to meet people for us anymore. So we do these shows about 7 times a week, and we've had your friend on, L.A. Marzulli, on. So we have him on every couple of weeks, and a wide variety. I've been trying to get Steve Quill on forever. I can never get a hold of the guy, so I know it's not easy. I'm sure he gets a million emails a day. So, but I appreciate you being so prompt to message us back and come on. It's been just a blessing. So, but
well, thank you guys for having me. Looking forward to our conversation.
Definitely, and I know our crowd's looking forward to it as well. The chat's already filling up on the website. People are filing in right now to watch, and so it's going to be great. So basically, I guess just kind of introduce a little bit about yourself, because I know you've done a lot of different work. I mean, I know this isn't your first documentary, and just in case there's somebody listening that has not heard of you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, about how you came into all of this?
Well, I am the director of Gen 6 Productions, a film production company, of which Steve Quayle is the producer. Steve and I work together. We develop films based on the premise of the 6th chapter of Genesis. That's why the company's called Gen 6 Productions. Steve Quayle, obviously, for those who don't know, is considered one of the leading authorities in the subject matter of giants, among other things. And he wrote a book called True Legends a few years ago. And basically, his book, True Legends, is the outline for our documentary series. We have produced 2 films in our series so far. The first one, episode 1, is called Technology of the Fallen. Episode 2, our latest film, is called The Unholy Sea. I also produced something called the Algorithm Analysis in conjunction with SteveQuayle.com. And we do research. We have been investigating some things together, Steve and I, for a few years now, working together. And our investigations have taken us all over the world, Europe, South America. We're working on things in the United States presently, which is, we have a forthcoming project. Actually, we have episode 3 that we're working on. We're filming episode 3. And by the way, for those who have seen episode 1 and 2, you may be interested to know that Tom Horn is now on the ground level of the True Legends documentary series. So we've kind of joined. I should say Tom and his team have joined the True Legends series. Let's put it that way. And we're working on episode 3 is going to be a dual project between Gen 6 Productions and the Skywatch TV team. So we're really excited about that. And again, that's already underway. We filmed some very intriguing things that are going to be featured in episode 3 from Italy, from Sardinia, and we're also tracking down some very interesting information with Tom Horn here in the United States. So that's what I'm currently doing. In terms of my background, it's difficult to give a short version of where I came from and how I got here. So let me just say that I spent what I describe as my formative years were spent in the Amazon, and I basically dropped out of high school and moved to the Amazon jungle when I was 18 years old. And after I dropped out of high school, I moved to the Amazon jungle, and for various reasons. And I had a life-altering, paradigm-shattering encounter in the jungle, and so that sort of set me on the track that I'm on now. And I lived in Peru for 10 years with my wife, and I have 4 kids, 4 boys, 2 of which were born in Peru. And so when I came back from Peru, I ended up hooking up with Steve Quayle through a series of events, and that's where I am now. Currently living in Montana, working with Steve Quayle.
Very cool, man. That sounds like a Indiana Jones type lifestyle for sure. And we definitely appreciate the amount of research you've done. I mean, I know what it takes to get documentaries done. I know what it takes to do other stuff, and it's not easy. It's a very intricate process and a lot of money involved in doing it. And so I would definitely appreciate our crowd. If you have not seen the Unholy See or you don't own it, go over and buy it. And you can get it on Vimeo. You can also buy it on their website. You can buy it on Skywatch's website, several others. And so make sure you guys check it out if you get a chance, because I'm telling you, it's really, really awesome. I wouldn't, I would say that probably on the subject, it's way up to par with History Channel documentaries, except from a truthful standpoint. As far as quality goes and content, it's really, really good. In my opinion, it makes the ancient alien theory, it gives them a run for their money on quality, and as well as what's inside of it. I mean, just valuable information. And I know David's excited because he's a gap theory guy, and you're a fellow gap theory guy, so he's excited about that. So we've been doing several shows about it recently.
Notice I said I am there without any hesitation.
Yeah, we were doing a radio show today, and David's been researching for up to 30 years, and talk about, like, David is probably one of the most well-educated people that I know in general, and I know quite a few people, but he is very educated. I wanted him on here as well to be able to ask questions to you and talk to you and all that. So as far as occult knowledge and the stuff that linking that stuff with scripture and all that, David is the go-to guy for me on that stuff.
I never do Alberino on his own because he copyrights like Steve Steve Quayle.
So wanted to link you guys together on this tonight. And a friend of mine just started over at Skywatch, and he was telling me that that we needed to have you on as well. He just started, I think, just like a week ago. Tom Horn was telling him all about the documentary, and he's like, "You got to have this guy." I'm like, "Dude, everybody's telling me that, so I guess I do." So, but anyway, with your documentary, man, you guys went all over the place. You've got some interesting stuff on there, and let me ask you this first to start it all off, and then we'll go wherever. Are you receiving any blowback from the Catholic Church or anything on this thing? Because it seems like you exposed the crap out of them in this documentary.
That's a good question. Let's put it this way. I don't have any, there isn't anything recently that has happened that would suggest any kind of blowback from the Catholic Church. I'm not getting emails. I'm not getting phone calls. There are some things that happened in the last 6 months that are questionable, that raise some concerns concerning the Catholic Church. But no, I mean, I've had death threats from Catholics from Ireland, but we're not talking about institutional threats. We're talking about individual Catholics. So nothing we take seriously. These are just very staunchly Catholic people who are very committed to the
I'll give the Catholics this: they do defend their faith.
Institution of Rome. So in terms of any kind of institutional blowback, in terms of the Vatican, the hierarchy, no, not anything recent.
My family and there's just 4 of us, and we were traveling from here up to Louisville, Kentucky, and we're listening to you and Steve Quayle. You guys had a traumatizing event where you had to get out of your house due to emissions, and you guys couldn't tell where it was coming from. I thought that was very compelling, the evidence that you presented during that interview with Steve. I was like, man, how do you deal with that, especially with young kids in the house?
Well, that was a very precarious situation. We almost lost our lives I forget the date actually right now. It was in March this year, and there were some strange. There are some very strange things associated with that event. I was visited in the hospital. It was carbon monoxide, by the way, poisoning. I was visited in the hospital by detectives. They had some very interesting questions for me, and I think I'll just leave it at that.
Wow.
Interesting, man. I can tell you this, that there's no, when you step in between somebody and their craft or their money, I mean, they will do whatever they can. It says the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And also I would say the love the knowledge of the occult, love all this stuff. Because I mean, you're putting a dent in what they're doing. There's no doubt about it. You guys have really put a dent in them. I mean, you got millions of people that have listened to your stuff, and I know that this can't be boding well upon their presence in just the United States and any country to begin with. So,
well, for the record, we don't, to this day, we're not 100% sure what happened, what occurred, other than we were.
This is actually 8 years old, guys. I didn't realize that.
We were being poisoned by carbon monoxide. There's a possibility it could have been an accident, and then there's a possibility it could have been intentional. But we've since taken measures to deter any kind of a threat against us, against myself and my family, against Steve and his family. And so we know who we're dealing with. I mean, if you want to be specific about who we're dealing with the Jesuits and the Greater Vatican. So, and we're in a very sensitive time right now in terms of the world at large, because every day we're getting closer and closer to what people call disclosure. And I believe that the mechanisms are already moving behind the scenes that make disclosure inevitable. And
we know they're doing disclosure now of all these drones, even though they might not be UFOs, they're putting it out there.
So, in some way, perhaps we have been problematic. Let's just put it that way. Gen 6 Productions has been problematic for those who are very concerned with controlling the narrative, because that's what this is about, is controlling the narrative. It's very important that when the narrative comes forward from these various institutions, including the Vatican, that it is well crafted and that it is widely received. And of course, they're expecting contention, but so we're out there kind of preempting along with Tom Horn and you guys and everybody else who's out there broadcasting and talking about these things. We're preempting something that is, again, very carefully controlled. It's something that has been in play for a long time behind the scenes. They've been crafting this thing for a very long time, and they don't appreciate that we're preempting them on the information. So, because preempting them means we're preparing ourselves and others ahead of what's coming, and that is something that I believe the Father is very interested in having his children prepared, obviously, for what's coming.
There's no doubt about it. I mean, the Bible says that they would deceive the elect if it were possible. And I think that all this stuff that you guys have exposed in this documentary, as well as Steve Quill's exposing, L.A. Marzulli, Rob Skiba, all the different programs out there that are doing this stuff, are trying to expose this mass deception that is coming in the form of alien contact, in the form of, whatever they choose to use. But I agree with you guys when you alien contact with the Vatican, with all that stuff that you guys mentioned in the documentary. I agree that is going to be the great deception. I mean, we're seeing it all over the world. It's so interesting. And you guys went to a lot of these sites where one of the most interesting things I saw in this documentary that I thought it just really played into a lot of stuff that I've been studying myself is these underground caverns underneath these major Catholic facilities and these ancient pagans facilities. What do you make of that? I mean, that was absolutely amazing. And I know that, you guys went and investigated a lot of this stuff.
Before we started the documentary series, Steve told me that whenever we go to wherever we go around the world, that we need to be looking for what's hidden under the ground. That what's above the ground may be interesting, but if we discover something above the ground, we need to understand that there's probably very likely something under the ground associated with it. And that has absolutely been proven to be true in every case in our experience in the field. But I would add another element to that idea, and that is that not every time, but more often than not, you're also going to find the presence of the Catholic Church, the presence of Rome. in some way, shape, or form. And when I say the presence of Rome, I don't mean, there's some megaliths outside of this town and there's a Catholic church in the town. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about there's some megaliths outside the town and there's a Catholic church on top of them or right next to them or over the access ways to gain access into what's beneath them. So that has definitely proven to be true. Whether it's Italy, whether it's Malta, whether it's Peru, this is what we found. And so we understand that there's an obvious desire by the Church of Rome, especially when we talk about the medieval Church of Rome and the Church of Rome through the Renaissance. There was a desire to conquer the pagan religions, to conquer the pagan peoples, and to plant the flag of the Holy See wherever they went. So if they conquered a nation, such as a people group such as the Inca, then their modus operandi would be to locate their most holy sites and to dominate those sites, to take them over, to desecrate them, to build a church and plant the dominion, the flag of the Holy See, the flag of Rome, the Church of Rome, the dominion of the Holy See. That's obviously in play, and that's obviously a factor that we have to consider. But whether intentional or not, what has happened is that in doing this, the Roman Catholic Church has also inherited, or I should say, has taken over a lot of these very ancient, very important archaeological sites merely by having a presence there, and not just a presence, a dominating presence, because we have to remember who wrote the majority of history. It was the Catholic Church. So if you go around the world and you look at a lot of these archaeological sites, especially the megalithic sites, you're going to discover that the primary archaeologists that were involved in excavating these sites, in many cases, were Jesuits, or if not Jesuits, were affiliates of the Roman Catholic Church. If they themselves were not priests, they were affiliates with the church. The church has had an invested interest for many, many decades, for many centuries, in locating and controlling these ancient archaeological sites. And many of the places that they ended up putting their churches, or their cathedrals, their monasteries, their community buildings, happened to be sitting right on top of ancient pagan temples. And again, because it's a show of dominance, but at the same time, they have been controlling some of the gateways into the underground network. For example, there's an underground network in South America. I should put it this way: the segment of the worldwide underground network that is in South America is referred to as the Shinkana, and it's an ancient legend. And if you look it up in history books to this day, you're going to find it as a legend, as an old wives' tale. To this day, it's a fairy tale to the archaeological community. But in fact, it exists, unequivocally so.
Diane, because of that, didn't Eisenhower meet with the ETs and do some sort of treaty?
It exists. It has been proven to exist. And that's some of the content that we have in our film. And there's oftentimes cover-ups involving these very ancient, anomalous, mysterious things, especially as it relates to things underground. It's the old adage of out of sight, out of mind. So there's a lot of things underground that are very important, especially as it pertains to history, that because they've been out of sight are completely out of mind, and they're certainly not written in our history books. Yeah, but somebody has collected this information. Somebody has collected the artifacts, and there are definitely two institutions who, on record, have done this, and that is the Vatican primarily, because they're of course the oldest, and then also the institution of the Smithsonian, which is a newcomer to this paradigm, because the Vatican is obviously is chief among all archaeologists. In fact, remember, it was the Church of Rome that began the sciences. I mean, they began the sciences in the modern, the universities and the sciences that we have them in the modern context. Of course, we have the ancient Greeks and the Romans that developed some of that science, but it was really the Church of Rome that institutionalized science and began to build the universities and to control knowledge. The control of knowledge is really what this is all about.
There's no doubt about it. We've done shows on the Jesuits. We've heard testimony from ex-Jesuits. We've also heard testimony from ex-33rd degree Freemasons and satanic priests and Catholic priests. One of them claims that in order to be a satanic high priest in the actual Satanism, not the carnival Satanism type, the real Crowleyism type Satanism, you have to be a Catholic priest as well, and you also have to be a master Mason. And so we see this network, and the Jesuit network just floods all of everything. I mean, you're talking politics, you're talking almost every church that I used to do Christian music. I used to play in a Christian band, and we play in a lot of different churches. Okay, this Jesuit symbolism, it was in half of the churches. I don't care if you're Baptist, Pentecostal, whatever kind of religion you think or denomination that you may be. In over half of these churches, I saw this Jesuit symbol in almost all of them. And when you see that there, you know that they've already been taken over. And this is everywhere, folks. This is not a conspiracy theory. If you look at the Jesuit, I believe it's societyofjesus.org, which is their website, it tells you exactly what their plan is. Their plan is to inundate themselves into the entire network of history and entire network of everything going on, and to infiltrate their ideas into the society. It tells you right there. And this is their website. This is not some conspiracy channel website or anything like that. This is their website. And so people need to be aware that this is happening. If they can control history, they can control the future. That's why they don't like the stuff that you guys are doing, because they know that you are, like you said earlier, you can control the outcome that they are seeking, which is to deceive the entire world, will not be possible if there's people out there exposing what they're doing. And
let's specify a little bit who they are for a moment, because when we talk about the Vatican, we're talking about a very broad, very large and complex organization in which there are a multitude of factions that don't necessarily play friendly, that don't necessarily like each other. And it's the same when you talk about, if you talk about the Masons, if you talk about whatever secret society, even the different occult lodges all over the earth are not necessarily allied with each other, but they do have something in common, and that is an allegiance to the mysteries. And so you have the mysteries, and when you talk about the mysteries, what you're talking about is the forbidden knowledge that was given to the human race. That knowledge comes from, obviously, it goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden, but specifically, we're talking about the knowledge that was given to human beings by the Watchers in the pre-flood world, in a pre-flood context. So the mystery schools are very, very ancient. They predate any institution, whether it be the Catholic Church or the Masons or the Egyptian priesthood. They predate all of it, because it was restoked in Babylon, at the Tower of Babel with Nimrod and that whole scenario. So what you have mystery school adepts of the mysteries, who are, for lack of a better term, occultists, who are distributed throughout all the different levels of society, and are members of different organizations, different occult organizations, whether it be the Bavarian Illuminati, whether it be the York Rite of the Masons or the Scottish Rite of the Masons. And by the way, within the Masons, there are only a select number of people who are actually initiated into those mysteries. Most people are taught nonsense concerning the symbolism and concerning the so-called secrets of Masonry and so forth. It's nonsense. It's a system of control. It's meant to make you think that you have knowledge, but really you don't. The knowledge is consolidated with the few. Believe me, it is. And so these mystery school adepts are distributed through every occult organization or every major occult organization. And then, of course, they're sitting in places of power, such as at the United Nations, the United States Congress, the Parliament of England, and so forth. But when you talk about the Vatican is not what people think. It's not a monotheistic Christian organization. Really, what it is it is a conglomerate of many religions. It is a hijacking of the gospel, but it is also a co-opting of many faiths, especially those of Rome and of Greece. So of the Romans and of the Greeks, and this is evident and then of course of the Egyptians. So let's specify for one moment the fact that the Jesuits, for example, are mainly concerned. The vast amount of Jesuits out there are mainly concerned with political ends. The Jesuits are communists at this point in history. So these guys are mainly involved in social justice, this kind of thing, liberation theology, which they invented. So the majority of Jesuits are not hiding artifacts. The majority of Jesuits are on the political level, are trying to influence the political, the geopolitical, and the social order of the world. And their bent is they're communist. That's evident in Pope Francis. By the way, that the whole situation was a massive coup at the Vatican. But Pope Francis, I mean. But so what I'm saying is this: within the Jesuits, there are a select few who understand or who have knowledge of the artifacts, of the bones. Within the Vatican at large, there are very few who have that knowledge. There is a very strong Luciferian faction in the Vatican, obviously. It's the same kind of Luciferianism that you'll find at the top of the Mormon organization, the Mason organization, that you'll find at at the top of any occult organization, even whether it be the Wiccans or whatever, if they are a legitimate mystery school organization, or at least have legitimate mystery school members involved in them. So we're talking about the top echelon of the occult that is distributed through many different factions on earth, the adepts of which are distributed through many different factions. What makes the Vatican so interesting, one of the things that makes it so interesting, is that the Vatican has the oldest and the most penetrating intelligence agency on earth, and that is widely known. In fact, it is covertly called the entity by members of our intelligence services, the NSA, the CIA, and so forth. It's called the entity because it is so old and so large and so penetrating. They know everything. They have, the biggest, the largest dossiers on everybody, and it is because they were the first. They were the first intelligence agency. They were the first organization to begin to infiltrate these different nations and these different organizations, and all this information was being passed to Rome, being fed to Rome. And of course, who was the most adept at this? The Jesuits. Really, the Jesuits perfected this kind of infiltration under Loyola. And so that's why the Jesuits are so key, is because they have the most effective intelligence organization on earth, and they're archaeologists, many of them. And so you just connect these dots, and you're going to discover really quickly that the Vatican is the oldest source of information in terms of intelligence gathering. So it's logical then to extrapolate that they also know the most about things pertaining to the ancient world, and you find that is in fact true.
When we look at the two big culprits,
This is 8 years old. Was Francis in power then? 8 years ago, 2016. Yeah, he came to power in 2012.
that are trying to rewrite history, and I think we could say rewrite ancient history. We have the Vatican and we have Freemasonry. And if we would ask ourselves what the two have in common, the commonality is the worship of the mysteries. If you really examine Catholicism, it's not Christianity, and the Eucharistic Jesus of Catholicism is the dying God of the mysteries. With just any casual observation, the Pope has on his head the mitre of Dagon, the fish hat, which goes back to Dagon to Oannes, which was the oldest known initiatic name in the Babylonian mysteries. And the same is true in Freemasonry. They worship Hiram Abiff. And in every Master Mason of the third degree, he goes through a mock burial and resurrection where he's raised in imitation of Hiram Abiff, who is explicitly stated in the Kentucky Monitor, there where Brother Hall is from, to be the savior of Freemasonry. And they both are heading toward the same goal. They both believe that there will one day be the return of the dying God of mysteries, which will place the blessing upon the religion of Freemasonry and the religion of Catholicism, which is basically converging to form the political and the religious wings of the New World Order. And that's why they both, right in our area, in Indiana and Ohio, as I'm sure Timothy well knows, the Smithsonian came in and they'd buy up all the giant bones, just like the Catholic Church did in South America. They're dual culprits for a dual reason, but because they're worshiping the same God, they are the same religion.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Bavarian Illuminati, and I think David's done some interesting research on where they're at right now, because here in this area, the census shows during the time the Bavarian Illuminati was ousted, this is where they moved in this area. There's the highest level of 33rd degree, highest per capita number of 33rd degree Freemasons in the area we live right now. So interesting research on that. And I saw on the documentary that you had this Lou, what was his name? Lou, I want to say Lou Ferrigno. I know that's not him. That's a bodybuilder. Incredible. What was the guy's name again?
Leo Zagami?
Yes. He showed you this building that was wedged in between these two buildings where he says satanic stuff goes on in there. What did you find out about that building? If you could tell our audience a little bit about that. That was really interesting.
Well, that was something that Leo Zagami revealed to us. By the way, Leo Zagami, I'm very much aware of the claims that Leo Zagami has made on the internet. I know who he is. I'm very well acquainted with him. I spent a lot of time with him in Rome. And we do not endorse or believe everything that Leo Zagami says. Look, we go where the information leads us. We go to the people who have the most credible information. And in terms of intel on the Vatican, Zagami has been second to none. And he actually told me some things about the Vatican and about things that are about to unfold at the Vatican. And strangely enough, Tom Horn found the exact same, in his research, came up with the exact same conclusions in the book that he and Chris Putnam just produced. I believe it's called The Final Roman Emperor. So, but the church that you're talking about, that actually has a pretty interesting backstory to it, because there was a particular night which we were walking around the Vatican. And for those who don't know, Vatican City is a nation state within Italy. It's one of the smallest nations on earth, but at the same time, one of the most influential. So Vatican City it's a whole nother deal. It's not really part of Italy. It is an entity unto itself. We happened to be at the Vatican a week or so after the Paris attack, the terrorist attack that happened in Paris, and because of that, the Vatican went dark. And when I say the Vatican went dark, I mean that literally. They turned all the lights off on one particular night that we were at the Vatican. We were there several nights, but the particular night that I was walking around with Leo Zagami, they turned all the lights off. They turned the lights off on St. Peter's Basilica. They turned the lights off in the general Vatican precinct. And there were armed guards everywhere with submachine guns, and some of them were Vatican military guys, and others were Italian military and Italian police. But so that's the night that we happened to be walking around. That's actually the night that we happened to walk into the headquarters of the Jesuits. And that was because of Leo Zagami. It was only because of Leo Zagami that we were able to walk into the headquarters of the Jesuits. And literally right down the road from the Jesuits, not even a half a block, is that location that you're referencing, that strange church that doesn't appear to have an entrance on the outside, but the entrances are connected to the two buildings on either side of it. It's a very old church. And according to Leo, that is where much of the Luciferian rituals happen in the Vatican. And also connected to that church are what we were told underground passageways. And everybody knows that Vatican Hill is sitting on top of catacombs. I mean, you can go visit them if you go to Rome. You can go into those catacombs. Those catacombs are well known because of the Christians that hid in them during the persecutions in Rome, and many of the bones of Christians that were buried there. So the Vatican is literally sitting on top of a network of catacombs. But what you're going to discover if you do the research and you talk to people who are in the know, and this is something that I find ubiquitous across the different sources that we've talked to or that I've researched, is that many of the rituals that happen at the Vatican happen below the Vatican. And you'll find this kind of information coming from Vatican whistleblowers, but also from just Illuminati whistleblowers in general. They'll tell you, in fact, some of them, that they were actually initiated under the Vatican. So it seems to me that at this point in time, at this point in history, that the Vatican has become the epicenter for occult activity on the earth, whether it be initiation into the Illuminati, whether it be the place where the actual artifacts have been gathered and have been stored. Many people know about the Vatican archives. This is something that is well known. And you can gain access to the Vatican archives if you're well connected at the Vatican, but you'll never gain access to the Vatican vaults. It's the Vatican vaults that are top secret, more so than the archives. And I have reason to believe that they have the bones of giants in those vaults, among other artifacts from the pre-flood world. And again, see, if you think like an initiated person, which I am not, never have been, we are profane. The group of us talking here tonight, we're profane. We're not worthy to know the mysteries, let alone to see the artifacts that are associated with the mystery. So yes, they want to cover it up for deception, for reasons of deception, but they're also covering it up for reasons of pride. We're simply not initiated. And so we should not have this knowledge. We shouldn't be prying into, in their minds, the things that belong to the adepts of the mysteries. We're profane. We're profane. And so it's a very serious situation. These guys are in contact with and are influenced by entities that are non-human. And so that's a long-winded answer to your question. That was Leo Zagami, and that church is, according to Leo, is one of the epicenters of the occult practitioners in the Vatican. I apologize for my long-winded answer.
I had no idea he was going to go on a long. Yeah, I had no idea he was going to do this about the Catholics. I would have put this up on its own if I knew that. This is a great expose.
Oh man, you're here so we can hear from you. So anything you want to talk about, we're definitely down to hear it, man. This is more laid back sitting than normally on the radio. We have breaks on the radio all the time, and we only get a certain amount of time. So you have the floor to say whatever you want on here. So we're definitely getting a lot of questions from the chat. We'll go through those guys here in a little. I just keep posting them. John's taking them, copying them, pasting them over here in our group chat, so we have them for later. So just go ahead and post your questions, and we will have them. And I thank you also thank you, Kevin, over on YouTube, for moderating the chat on YouTube. I forgot that I had given you the wrench to be able to tighten down the nuts and throw them out of there. So if you feel the need, go for it, man. Thank you again over there. And because we haven't been able to keep track of that. So, but also, Kevin, if you would like to field questions over to John from the YouTube chat on Messenger, or to myself, then feel free to do so. One thing that I guess that, I would have this question, you talked about, you went into the Jesuit church. This was interesting to me. You went in there and they let you like go some places that I was very surprised that they let you go in.
Well, we went into the Jesuit. We went into the Jesuit headquarters. The Jesuit church is actually across the street. The Jesuit, and we didn't get very far into the Jesuit. We were just able to penetrate into the lobby. There's a very small lobby, and there's a security guard there. The reason why we were able to get in there is because Leo Zagami was at one time the union leader for the Vatican police.
Hey, Shawnee, good to see you.
And some of the Roman police. And so he's very well liked, very well connected, and he happened to know the security guard. And so the guy allowed us to come in with our cameras, which, of course, that's very unkosher at the Vatican. You don't just walk in with cameras. But so we walked into the foyer, if you will, the security. They got a very small little area there when you walk into the Jesuit. It's just basically a security desk. And then there's just a big symbol on the wall, as you see in the documentary there, that we were standing in front of, and that's it. I mean, it's very it's a very conspicuous. I'm sorry, very inconspicuous location. But what's interesting to me is when I met with Leo, and also we met with Gianmario Ferramonti, who's also a Vatican insider. Very famous guy in Italy, very rich guy, and was personal friends with Zechariah Sitchin. And Leo's a friend of his, so we met with Leo and with Ferramonti. And so I was going to ask about if these guys had any information concerning the Vatican vaults and what might be in the Vatican vaults. But immediately, as soon as I sat down and we started to talk, immediately, these guys started talking about the Vatican and aliens, and alien disclosure, and the coup that had taken place at the Vatican by the Jesuits, and how it has to do with alien disclosure. And so I found that intriguing, because I wasn't even thinking in those terms for that particular interview. I was just going to be asking these guys about the Vatican vaults, which I do, but when we were in the Jesuit headquarters, which is in our film, Leo wanted to talk about Mount Graham, and what's important to understand is that Leo Zagami does not know Tom Horn and did not read his books, but he had the exact same information as Tom Horn, who, as many of your viewers may know, Tom Horn actually with Chris Putnam went to the top of Mount Graham, and they wrote Exo Vaticana, and we actually have some of their footage in our film. That footage that has been hitherto unseen. So we're actually in the Jesuit, in the headquarters of the Jesuits, talking about the Jesuits on Mount Graham, and Leo was telling me that he believes that they're there because they're interested in the knowledge of the Watchers. Again, the mystery school knowledge, and that the Mount Graham was important to the Apache Indians, and it's one of their holiest mountains. In fact, it is their holiest mountain. And he believes that there's a connection there. There's artifacts. There's something there, perhaps a portal, a gate, a stargate, having to do with the Watchers. And we're talking about this in the headquarters of the Jesuit. I'm sure we're the first people to ever stand there and talk about Mount Graham and portals and Watchers. And as we're talking, we had a couple of Jesuit priests walk in, and you might catch in the film where I look off to the side and Leo kind of lowers his voice and kind of whispers things to me, because precisely at the moment he's talking about the Watchers, Jesuit priest walked in and just kind of stood there with his arms crossed, looking at us, and with a scowl on his face, and probably
That's the first time I've seen you in chat, Shawnee.
wondering how in the world we got permission to film inside of their headquarters. And so it was, and remember, this is the night that the Vatican went dark. It's the same night.
Oh.
So it was pretty touch and go over there. I mean, I can tell you that out of everything I've done so far and everywhere that I've went, I was probably the most nervous in the headquarters of the Jesuits.
I would say so, man. We've got an invite to go to Russia and talk with a couple of the leading guys there. I think that one guy is second in command of Putin, and another guy is they call him Putin's Rasputin, and he's considered by Glenn Beck to be the most dangerous man in the world, which I guess by the words he speaks. And I'm scared to do it, honestly. I'm like, well, I don't know. Maybe I can, maybe I will. I've never. Have you ever been to Russia? I mean, I don't know what to expect out of that, but.
No, I haven't been to Russia, but we were and are considering going to Bosnia and also to the Crimea. We have considered also going to Russia.
Okay, well, Russia took Crimea since this has happened.
For various things, but
you guys are going to Moscow. Let me know, because we've got the oil guy that wants to get us down there and all this stuff. So there might be something we could team up on because there's a lot of ancient sites there. Obviously, like around Moscow, around that area, you've got the Hittite civilization. You've got all kinds of interesting stuff, and we'll pretty much be in the protection of these guys there. So
Putin is actually putting pressure on the government of the United States and has been for disclosure, and they're trying to force the hand of the U.S. government in terms of releasing certain information. And if you watch Russian news, if you read the transcriptions from Russian news and news coming basically out of that part of the world, you're going to find that it's a lot more. They're a lot more open to talking about things, and they seem to be in the background pushing for certain things to be revealed. Many people are aware of the possible megalithic structures that were discovered in Russia. I've looked at them. I think that there is a high probability that they are not naturally occurring rock compositions. They appear to me, again, that there's a high probability that they are in fact megalithic structures, and those are in Siberia. I think there's a whole lot of stuff that the Russian government knows about in Siberia pertaining to giants and pertaining to megaliths.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Definitely some mysteries, according to my Armenian friend that goes there all the time, that's friends with these guys. And also in Turkey, he likes to get to Turkey when things calm down a little bit as well. But so definitely we got to hook up on some of these things, man. I know that there's a lot there that can be talked about, I'm sure. So we'll talk more about it later in the future when it happens. So, but yeah, so, I can guarantee that the Vatican, like you said, is one of the only sovereign nations left in the world, if not the only, as far as I know. There are about 100 acres, 50 acres, something like that, very small place.
Just over a mile, I think, is the area that they occupy in Italy.
They have their own central bank. They have their own military. They have all these different things. Now you went to Malta. You talked a little bit about the history of Malta, being that, Italy's been there at one time. You've had the Knights of Malta, the Knights of St. John. You've had all these different civilizations in this spot. And I believe this was the one, correct me if I'm wrong, where there was a tunnel leading from one point to the other in this place. And you had somebody on your documentary that had discovered this catacomb that had this tunnel going from one point to the other, and they covered it up. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
That was actually in Peru. That was dealing with the Coricancha in Peru. However, what is so interesting about Malta is how analogous it is with Peru. The situation in Peru, you have megaliths. You have megaliths that display some of the very same techniques. You have some of the same kind of myths in both Peru and Malta. You have these megalith builders who suddenly disappeared off the map, along with their technology. And you have, most importantly, a known underground network of tunnels and caverns, some of which are man-made, others are naturally occurring. And again, I believe that whether it's Malta, whether it's Peru, what we're dealing with are segments of a worldwide, of a global underground world of a global underground network of not only tunnels but naturally occurring caverns, but also very large artificial caverns. And we're talking about ancient caverns and tunnels, man-made tunnels. Which of course, according to conventional history, it's impossible to build anything on, number one, on that scale, but number two, to construct man-made tunnels that run hundreds of miles without modern tools, and obviously without flashlights and so forth. This is a fascinating subject because we live on the surface of the earth, but I believe that there's a whole nother realm beneath our feet, and I'm not just talking about Hades, if Hades is indeed located in the center of the earth, or Sheol, or whatever you want to call it. I'm talking about a system of caverns and tunnels that are still occupied by things that are not human. And it's interesting when you consider that it was Hitler who really kicked off the building of DUMBs, the deep underground military bases. It was the Third Reich that began to do this, and partly because we were bombing the hell out of them. In World War II, I mean, we were devastating them with our bombers. So they had to go underground by necessity. I think they were underground anyway, but they really had to take their operations underground, and they had to build large facilities to manufacture their tanks and their aircraft and so forth under the ground. And they were doing a lot of their secret experimentation under the ground, out of the reach of our bombers. So it seems apparent to me that during the excavation, during the building of these underground tunnels, we have encountered some of these entities, and we have made use of some of the natural caverns and passageways that exist. And we're talking very, very, very old, maybe pre-Adamic, probably some of them pre-Adamic, certainly pre-flood. So the question is, again, out of sight, out of mind. And I know this is kind of moving us in a different direction. But if you're building a secret underground bases using black budget funding that nobody knows about, then essentially you have constructed a world in which no conventional laws apply because nobody knows about it. There is no jurisdiction over these underground bases that are miles beneath the surface of the earth. Let's put it in these terms: both modern DUMBs and ancient DUMBs that are now interconnected. And so there is we found in our film, we document proof that these tunnels do in fact exist both in Malta and in Peru, and that there was obviously a ubiquitous technology and knowledge at one point in the earth. At one time in the distant past, there were entities on Earth that were building to the megalithic scale with the megalithic technology, but they weren't just building up above the Earth. They were building down below the Earth. And what's interesting about Malta,
and that's a good point, because we do that with our dumb bases. They can go like 15 stories underground. So that's not so outlandish, is it?
Is if you look at the megaliths on the surface of the Earth, and you look at the way that they're configured. Now they're limestone. They're made out of limestone in Malta because that's a stone that was available to the builders. And limestone isn't nearly as hard as andesite and granite, which we find in Peru. So the andesite and granite megaliths are still in relatively good condition, whereas the limestone megaliths are greatly eroded. However, it's the same technology. It's the same scale. And so I think it's safe to assume that we're dealing with the same race, that we're dealing with the same species, if you like. At least the technology was ubiquitous. Again, both for the building of megaliths on the surface of the Earth and for the structures below the Earth, many of which reflect what is above the Earth. I found that to be the case in both Peru and Malta, by the way. In Peru, the underground structure of the Shinkana reflected exactly what was above the earth in the Coricancha. And you have to go see the film if you're wondering what I'm talking about. And in Malta, it's the same dynamic. We found that the megalithic constructions on the surface of the earth were exactly replicated under the earth in the hypogeum. And so what we're dealing with is not just people who have the technology to build under the ground, which is astounding if you think about the ancient world and the tools that were supposedly available to them. But the fact that not only were they building under the ground, they were absolutely replicating what was on the surface. The megalithic scale and the megalithic style was being replicated under the ground. So now you don't need to just consider how do they move these extremely large, multiple hundreds of ton blocks from the quarry 20 miles away and lift them up and place them into position, such as in the walls of Sacsayhuaman. Now you have to figure out, how did they build a tunnel? How did they build an underground tunnel that running for hundreds of miles and getting those megalithic blocks under the ground in the dark and constructing them, configuring them beneath the surface of the earth? We're dealing with something that is far grander and far more astounding than people give it credit for.
You're not lying on that, dude. That documentary where you guys went underneath the ground and showed these, most people, they've seen these megalithic structures. You can't fit a blade in between these cracks that they built these things on, and there's no mortar completely fit on top of it, like you were saying. And then underground, the same exact thing going for miles. That's unreal to me. I mean, even today, there's no way it can be done today. People use concrete and they build tunnels. I mean, yeah, I'll give them that, but not in this pattern, not in this way. This is huge stones that they put underneath the ground. And you showed that in your documentary. And I want to say it one more time. If you guys haven't got that documentary, you can go on Vimeo and watch it tonight, or you can order it and get the physical copy, whatever. Do it. I'm telling you, you will not be disappointed. I promise you that. This was over 2 hours worth of information that is just astounding. I'm telling you that I haven't seen a documentary more complex on
Shawnee, Phil sorted that out. He's got audio again.
The subject, especially these underground tunnels and these megaliths, and it's just interesting to say the least. And at the beginning of the documentary, you started out with the story that we've heard from L.A. Marzulli and from Stephen Quell.
That's right.
Yeah, L.A. Marzulli had an animation at the beginning about the giant. You actually had a witness of the event, or not of the event, but of the plane that was carrying this cargo in the beginning. And if you can tell us just a little bit about that. I want people to get the documentary, and I want you to tell them everything. Oh, well, actually, I don't care. If you want to tell them everything, go for it. I think that they would still probably buy the documentary. I know you guys are going to go buy it because you support. You guys do that for, you guys bought the crap out of some L.A. Marzulli DVDs, so I expect you guys to do the same for Timothy. And just go check it out and support what they're doing, because this is awesome stuff, because it takes a lot of money to travel all over the place to get this information. It takes a lot of equipment and a lot of guts to be quite honest. I know that somebody in the chat said not to worry about going to Russia. Yahweh is with me, and I agree with that. You're right. My flesh got the best of me thinking of the fear behind it, but it does take a lot of.
You have to be careful. You have to.
Here's what bugs me about it is not the going, but returning back to this country and back to the, you get a passport going to Russia and then you return, right? They're going to be watching us.
Well, yeah, the guy that sets up his interviews is banned from most of Europe and CIA list, FBI list, all those different things, and has been for about 10 years now. So, yeah. But, I mean, as interviewers, we may be able to slide past that. He was actually over there to help when he was the guy that sets up his interviews now. I can tell you a little bit about his past, but he was the leader of the world, the national, I can't remember what it's called, the National Lies Skinhead Party. He was the head guy of the whole thing. He's was the world's strongest skinhead, but during the time when there was a lot of revolution over there, people were getting killed in the street, stuff like that, they brought him over there to help curb the riots. And he was with some of the most powerful people. This was before Putin went in. And he has a lot of friends over there. He was actually doing some active things. We'd just be filming. So I think we'd probably be all right just filming as videographers. And at least I hope. I don't know. I don't want to get on a watch list personally, but, they have a lot of boring times watching me, I think, at least coming up, because I'm getting ready to move and do a lot of stuff. So they would have a boring time anyway. So But anyways, yeah, it would be interesting. And I know, like I said, guys, it takes a lot of, you have to be really careful. Like he was saying, you have to be so careful in when you do this kind of stuff. And we just love to support the people that are doing this stuff for us, because there's ancient aliens, there's all these other things that are the opposite of what you need to hear, that people are sitting watching all day long and doing that. This is the kind of stuff that we need to hear. This is the kind of stuff that everybody needs to hear. There's a deception coming, folks. It's coming quick. So,
by the way, you can get our film at TrueLegendsTheSeries.com for those who are curious. Yeah, I would. That sounds fascinating. This possible potential interview in Russia. You have to be. You have to take every precaution that you can. When I go on an expedition overseas, we check a lot of things out beforehand. We've had some very strange things happen. We've had some, I'll just leave it at that. We've had some very strange things happen. But you gotta be confident that the Lord's in it. And if you are, then, you go for it, but you gotta be wise as a serpent. And, sometimes, and Steve Quayle has some very interesting stories along these lines. You have to talk to people who are not the nicest people to get the kind of information you need.
That's true.
And in fact, you may be actually even dealing with people who are double agents and all kinds of stuff. And so you just have to be as wise as you possibly can be, as careful as you possibly can be, and have your eyes open, because I can guarantee you one thing: if you go over there, you will be watched. That I can guarantee you.
Yep. And when definitely coming back to there, it's definitely something to think about. And we have an investigative guy that we have for our TV. He's a young guy. He's not married and with kids. We might just send him over there. Just kidding, Jake, by the way. We're probably not going to do that. I'm not
We'll send Jake over there.
He's already got his passport, so see you later, Jake. But no, I want to go over there. This is an experience that most people don't get to do, and so I'd be kicking myself years down the road if I didn't do it. So,
but you would be if Jake didn't come back.
I don't know who this Jake is, but I'm gonna have to employ him too if this works out for you guys.
Yeah, he's an awesome kid, man. He's only like 22 years old. Communications degree. He's a world traveler. He's been all over the place already, so perfect for that kind of stuff. But yeah, so I guess the giant thing, man. Tell us a little bit about that, because I know we've heard L.A. Marzulli's side, but you have a different angle than L.A. Marzulli went with on your documentary. So it's from the eyes of the person that was transporting this thing, and L.A. Marzulli kind of went with the angle of the troops that were outside killing it. And
I'm not sure if those are the same story, because the guys that LA interviews, I believe that they're referencing an incident that happened in 2003, and they're referring to this entity as the Kandahar giant. So obviously this occurred in Kandahar in 2003. The pilot that our contact relayed to us a story that occurred, an incident that occurred in 2005 at Bagram Air Force Base, where this giant was supposedly killed not far from the base in the mountains. And so I'm not sure if these are the same stories and if these guys are just getting their facts mixed up. We don't know yet. We're not sure. I would love for them to be the same story, because obviously they would corroborate each other. But the AC-130, the pilot that our contact is an AC-130 pilot, active duty to this day. Long story short, he was called. He was sent to Bagram to pick up some cargo, and it turned out to be the body of a dead giant, of a estimated 12-foot giant. He estimated his size to be between 10 and 12 feet tall. However, we know exactly how much he weighed, because the weighmaster had to weigh the cargo before it went into the AC-130 in the back of the plane, and he weighed 111 pounds.
What?
I'm sorry, he weighed 1,100 pounds.
Like
And
that
if you
giant.
yeah, no, he wasn't that big. He weighed 1,100 pounds. So if you subtract 100 pounds for the tarp and the rope and so forth, the guy was 1,000 pounds. That much we know for sure. Estimated 10 to 12 feet tall. The guy was 1,000 pounds. So, and he was solid as a rock.
What the hell did he eat?
6 fingers, 6 toes, again, the story is very similar to the one that the individual in L.A. Marzulli's film relates. But again, I'm not sure if it's the same story. In fact, we were very interested to find out if it is. But at this point, we may be dealing with 2 different giants from Afghanistan, which would be, even more incredible.
Was there any indication to you that there were in these tunnels underneath these churches that, and I know in the documentary you mentioned a little bit about that, but that there are giants living in there to this day, or that there were at one time?
Well, we do know that the few who have ventured down into those tunnels, both in Malta and in Peru, the ones that have gone in and have exited either died right after they came out, or were mentally disturbed for the rest of their lives.
Wow.
Most do not come out of these tunnels. Obviously, if you're wandering around in the dark lost for multiple days under the ground, that's going to damage you mentally, and may lead to some other complications if you find your way out, some other health complications that could lead to your death. But I have a feeling that it's more than just just a case of these people being under the ground for long periods of time without food. I think that they're encountering something under the ground, that a lot of the people just end up getting lost. And again, when I say a lot of the people, there are historic.
Hey, JD, good to see you, mate.
Documented cases in both Malta and Peru of groups of people going under the ground. And again, either never coming back or the few that do make it back are not well. And I think there's every indication that there are trying to
Love state of the heart, good balance.
That there are entities still alive living in this underground world. And certainly, I think that it's potentially giants would be some of those entities. And it makes sense to me that they would be in caves, that they would be frequently, I shouldn't say frequently, but that they would be discovered in caves, because oftentimes caves have entryways into these underground systems. So it seems to me that they would be making use of these systems. And it's not just giants, by the way. I think we're dealing with a host of different kinds of things that may be down there.
I know I've heard some of the same exact kind of stories from Skinwalker Ranch and places like, what's the Tucson? Not Tucson. Is it Tucson? I can't remember where it was, John. We had a guy on talking about that, his encounters with these weird portal type beings that keep coming in.
Somewhere out there, Arizona, Tucson, somewhere. It's interesting.
Right now, but yeah, so I definitely believe there's something going on. I mean, this is the kind of stuff, and I think Steve Quell mentioned in the documentary saying that there are troops designated to go down and take these entities out. This is their job to kill these creatures.
To kill the things that go bump in the night. That's what he was told by a general.
David was on TFR with us earlier, and we were talking about the basilisks and the different creatures that you've got all these paranormal shows out, ancient alien shows out, monster ministries out. Yet, here in Kentucky, there's been an increase in, cryptic sightings. And it's just everyday people, they're not trying to get out there and, they're not trying to make a name for themselves. They're just seeing things that's not normal. And it seems like it's increasing. These stories that people are coming out with, it's incredible.
Especially over in your area, John, too, because you have one of the largest cave systems it goes all underneath Kentucky, right there by where you live.
Well,
It has a tie into it right there.
What's interesting, John, is when you came here and we did the photo shoot for the TFR, we've got the oldest Catholic church this side of the Alleghenies, St. Joseph, and there's cave networks underneath it, right? You know, that's we produce bourbon here, and they use that water, or used to make the bourbon, but there's huge cavernous caves underneath St. Joseph, and I thought that was interesting. You know, what Timothy was bringing up, I'm going, huh, that's interesting.
It's an interesting church. That cornerstone was very interesting. Like went underneath the ground. It was like see-through, very, very crazy stuff, weird cryptic stuff in that church. So yeah, you live right near those cave systems, and I've been in some of these cave systems. I mean, there's a certain point to where you're allowed to go, but you can go you can go miles and miles and miles underneath there, and there's so many Bigfoot sightings, all these different sightings around that area that just makes you wonder. But yeah, Timothy, we got questions in the chat. Are you up for staying around answering?
Sure. Yeah. I'm here as long as you guys want me.
Awesome, man. It's been really great too, by the way. And I just appreciate your time, man. I know it's not easy time is something that we do not have enough of most of the time. So, and David, I know you had some questions for Timothy. You've been really quiet and very, I've never heard you be so quiet in my life, David. You must be really.
Well, I'm just enjoying the conversation, but yeah, I certainly have some questions that, time permitting, I would be willing to ask.
Well, why don't we go with your questions first, and we'll go to the chat questions, and we'll go from there, because we got them lining up. So go for it, man. It's great. I wanted to connect you guys anyway. I mean, I think I really respect both of your guys' work, and I think that it's just an amazing thing to be able to sit with these great minds. I mean, I'm very 7 years I've been a believer, and so like to me to be able to connect with the great minds that I've connected with over the last few years, or last 2 years, really.
Okay, I didn't know that. So now you see TV is John Pounder's channel, not David's. That's what it looks like. I didn't know that. I thought David would have been in charge.
I mean, I did some before, but I mean, to really be able to connect with you guys is just a blessing for me, and I'd love to hear more from you guys and less from me.
Well, what I would like to do is have Timothy lay hands upon me so I can pronounce words like he does, like Sasquatch and all. You know, I just butcher those so bad, and he does such a good job pronouncing those words. So maybe that'd work out.
Practice.
Yeah, I'll just keep listening and practice. But one thing really raised questions in my mind. You were talking about the freestanding structures in Malta being some of the oldest you believed in the world, and you connected this to the building structure in Tiahuanacan in the Andes.
Mm-hmm.
And you made mention that the building structure at Tiahuanacan was different from a lot of the other megalithic sites in South America. And we see not only the as above, so below, that they would build underground what would mirror what was above the ground, but also they would build above ground what correlated to the constellations in the heavens.
Precisely.
And Graham Hancock and Robert Bobal and a lot of other researchers have done a lot of work in this area, and they've determined that it points to a date, that the way that like the Giza pyramids are laid out, it points to a specific date of 10,450 BC. And it really caught my eye what they said about, he wrote the fingerprints of the gods about Tiahuanaco, and he says that the date that Tiahuanaco was pointing to was 15,000 BC. And I just wondered, from your observations, do you think it's possible that that might be the oldest site, and that we might even be looking at just not an antediluvian site, but a pre-Adamite site, like a Genesis 1:1 site before the world became without form and void?
This is where it gets really tricky. And I'll be honest, this is the question that I myself have pondered many times, is what belongs, if anything, to the pre-Adamic age, and what belongs to the pre-flood age. Now we can say definitively, and we do, that the megaliths belong to the pre-flood age, but that does not mean that they do not then also belong to the pre-Adamic age. I'm not sure how far they go back. I will say this, we were in Tiwanaku in Bolivia. In the first episode of our series, we went to Tiwanaku, and which is of course a very famous megalithic site, and that was also very touch and go being in Tiwanaku, because it felt like I had entered North Korea. It gets a little bit confusing. The site is called Tiwanaku, whereas the town is called Tiwanaku. And Tiwanaku is it's the town in which the megalithic remains are located, and it is locked down. It is the most oppressive place I have ever been in my life. It's like North Korea over there. I mean, you've got armed guards, and they don't even let you touch the stones. I mean, they bullhorn you, and we had to get out of there in a hurry. But as far as it being the oldest, I'm not sure if Tiwanaku is the oldest. I know that Malta, the megaliths at Malta, are claimed to be the oldest freestanding structures on Earth, but they're claimed by that claim is made by conventional archaeologists and historians who obviously do not believe in a pre-flood dynamic, or let alone a pre-Adamic dynamic. So these guys are just trying to come up with these numbers via carbon dating. Both Tiwanaku and Sacsayhuaman, which is in Cusco, Peru. Tiwanaku's in Bolivia, Sacsayhuaman's in Cusco, Peru. They're a couple hundred miles apart. Are said to have been constructed by the Inca or pre-Inca cultures. So they're said to have been constructed, these megalithic sites, by natives who didn't even have the wheel. They were using, at best, copper chisels. And in the case of Malta, deer antlers, that's the claim. So these guys ostensibly were using metal chisels that were softer than the stone that they were perfectly carving, which is, of course, stupid. So the claim there in Tiwanaku, and when I say the claim, I mean, it's like they tell you this is the way it is, and the people who tell you that have guns strapped to their sides in Bolivia. That's the way it is. I mean, it is locked down. That is the narrative that they force upon you. Now, in Peru, it's not. That's what they believe in Peru, but they're not nearly as militaristic about it. But in Bolivia, if you go to Tiwanaku, I mean, it is forced upon you. In fact, they have what I believe are English-speaking informants walking around listening to what your commentary on the stones, and that's what we ran into. And of course, my commentary on the stones was that these are pre-flood. These are very ancient, thousands of years old. Now, what's interesting is this. We surmised in Tiwanaku that we were only looking at the tip of the iceberg. If you're in Tiwanaku, and you can see this in our first film, Technology of the Fallen, you'll see where they've excavated. And you can see it in Ancient Aliens. They go to Tiwanaku, make a big deal out of it. You know, aliens built it and so forth. But they don't even, let's talk about that for a second. Ancient Aliens, these guys go over there, and I respect some of these guys, David Hatcher Childress and Brian Forster, and some of these guys. I admire their work to a degree. I think they're coming to the wrong conclusions. However, I agree with at least some of what they put forward. But they're sitting on top of these ruins, in some cases measuring them, right, with their tape measures and so forth, and their squares, and talking about aliens must have built these. But what they're not talking about are two things. Number one, obviously, Tiwanaku, as well as Sacsayhuaman, was devastated in a great flood. Period. I mean, it's a done deal. Both of those sites were submerged, and they were submerged beneath the waters of the ocean. They were devastated in a great flood. Okay, that's number one. Number two, both of those locations, both of the ruins and the ruins in both locations, Sacsayhuaman in Peru and Tiwanaku in Bolivia, are primarily under the ground still to this day. The vast majority of what those sites were at one time is still buried beneath the sediment that was deposited during the flood. Now, I say that so definitively because I have proof. And when you're there, I mean, it is so ridiculous how in Peru and Bolivia, the claims that they make, it's absolutely ridiculous, and how they force them upon you. Again, in Bolivia, they force them upon you in a very militaristic way. In Peru, they're not so aggressive. And so I surmise that what we were looking at in Tiwanaku, what was on the surface of the earth, these big megalithic blocks, was just the tip of the iceberg. And that if you look around at the landscape, if you're standing in Tiwanaku, Bolivia, and you do a 360, and you know anything about the mounds and the mound builders in the United States, by the way, the mound builders in Sardinia, and the pyramids that are still covered with sediment, pyramids covered in sediment that people call conical hills. Archaeologists refer to some of these as conical hills, when in fact they're megalithic structures. All over the world, by the way. And you look around in Bolivia and you feel like you're looking at hills and mounds that you get the sense are artificial. You get the sense that that's a pyramid, that's a structure, and they purposely are not digging it up. And if you're in Tiwanaku and you look at the excavations that they've done, they went 5 feet down and stopped. And you can see these large megalithic stones protruding out of the ground. And my thought was, why did they stop? Why? Why did they stop? So they just uncovered the tip of the iceberg, and then they fabricate this ridiculous story about pre-Columbians who built it without the use of the wheel, with soft metal chisels, deer antlers, ropes, and other ridiculous stories such as that. And again, we surmise that the majority of this thing is under the ground, and there's a reason why they don't want to keep digging. Well, I talked to a guy named Anselm P. Rambla in our film in The Unholy Sea. I interviewed Anselm P. Rambla. Anselm P. Rambla.
Okay, there's a guy called the Sleeping Prophet. His name was Edgar Cayce. He was pretty famous in his day. And he said, they asked him how did they move the pyramid rocks? And this was his answer. In the same way iron floats on water. Now, if you would have told the Romans our battleships are made of metal, steel, they'd think you're nuts because steel can't float. But I wonder what's going on with the rock, because they do some sort of trick with the rock as well. That's how they move the rock. The same way steel floats on water, somehow they make rocks float on air.
Is an explorer, and a researcher, and he takes a professional team of archaeologists and other professionals with him, especially to South America. He does a lot of work in South America, but not exclusively South America. By the way, he's a Spaniard. He's from Spain, and they go and they do excavations in some of these places, and he actually was, and by the way, he's the one who confirmed the existence of the Chincana beneath the Coricancha, the existence of the underground tunnels in Peru. And he confirmed it scientifically with ground penetrating radar, and he saw it with his own eyes with some of his team members. That story is laid out in our film. But what we don't say in our film, for those of you who have seen our film, this is something I don't say in the film, which I probably should have, is that during my conversations with Anselm P. Rambla, he revealed to me that they had also done an excavation in Tiwanaku. They went in with ground penetrating radar. They were allowed to do an excavation. They were able to get the permit for it. And he said, Tim, he said, you wouldn't believe what's under the ground at Tiwanaku.
Wow.
He absolutely confirmed exactly what we had suspected.
Wow, you wouldn't believe what's under the ground in Tiwanaku. What could it possibly be? It'd be more than tunnels.
He said the vast majority of what is there is covered in sediment and buried beneath the earth, and they will not dig it up. This comes from a guy who was there excavating with ground penetrating radar. And they only allowed him to go so far, and he proved it with his excavation that the whole thing is still underground. Why did they stop? The same question can be asked of Sacsayhuaman, the famous walls of Sacsayhuaman, which we feature in our film and that are outside of Cusco. It's a fact. And again, Anselm P. Rambla proved this by doing excavations with archaeologists, doing excavations using ground penetrating radar as well, that the vast majority of the great walls of Sacsayhuaman are buried beneath the earth. So everybody looks at the walls of Sacsayhuaman, all these learned archaeologists, institutional archaeologists and historians, and they come up with these stupid ideas of how the Inca built it, and they're not even looking at the vast majority of this massive complex. It's already unbelievable, the story that they fabricate about how these things were built without even seeing 90% of the construction. And he proved unequivocally that the Inca did not build the walls of Sacsayhuaman, because all you have to do is do a cursory excavation at Tiwanaku and at Sacsayhuaman, and you're going to discover the remains of cultures that pre-existed the Inca. I mean, end of story. The Inca didn't build it. These other cultures were there first, and they certainly didn't build it. The Inca were great builders, by the way, just like the Romans were great builders. But neither the Romans nor the Inca nor any other known culture were capable of building Cyclopean megaliths. None of them. And so you have to ask yourself the question, how is it that such a technology that can withstand the tempests of time, a technology that has withstood earthquake after earthquake, when all the other edifices come collapsing down around them, these Cyclopean megaliths stand fast? How is it that a technology so beneficial to mankind suddenly disappears from the earth with no record of how to build it, with no record indicating what kind of technology was involved? Well, there are only two answers. One, the great flood of Noah decimated these edifices and destroyed their civilizations that they were associated with and the technology. That's one. Or the other possibility is that it was that the destruction happened in a pre-Adamic time, and that these edifices belong to a pre-Adamic dynamic. I'm okay with either answer. So if we state, which we do, these are pre-flood constructions, we're right on both counts if they happen to also be pre-Adamic. And one more thing, you mentioned, David, the fact that people are beginning to use the stars, and appropriately so, to date these constructions, these megalithic sites. And in every case, you're coming up with thousands of years, not hundreds of years, thousands of years when dealing with the megaliths. And I asked Anselm P. Rambla, who moves in the archaeological circles, and I asked him, if the archaeological community, why are they so aggressive in terms of the denial of these obvious realities? And he actually told me that there's a new breed of archaeologists that are now putting more confidence in the dating. I forget what it's called, David. It has a term, using the stars to date these to date things on the earth as above, so below.
Yeah.
Well, carbon dating's not accurate.
New breed of archaeologists is actually putting more stock in that at this point than in carbon dating, because it's turning out to be more accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's now the websites they have to where they can get very, very precise on these dates. And when we're talking about a 15,000 BC date, this is forcing us to begin to think in pre-Adamic terms. And I think it's possible, of course, this is just theoretical, but we've got a mixture of pre-flood and pre-Adamic, and it's hard to sort out. But just like the Catholics are now building on antediluvian sites, it would follow that it's quite possible that the antediluvians build upon pre-Adamic sites. And this could be why they do not want people looking underneath these things, because this would come out even more clear than it has. I mean, and it's just an insult to people's intelligence to even conjecture that these were built by primitive peoples. And, it's just amazing the things that you all have brought to light. And one more thing I'd like to run by you here. So many things, but there's what I believe is a real smoking gun that seriously connects. And of course, there's much conjecture, but there was actually the gentleman, I believe, perhaps Mr. Dagami was his name, that had an actual photograph of the leading Vatican exorcist, Balducci, performing an exorcism with the leading Satanist in Italy. Now, what in the world would a Vatican exorcist be doing publicly cooperating with the Satanists, even being photographed doing an exorcism? And I think this takes the rumors about the church there in Rome beyond the veil of conjecture, that there are serious connections at the highest levels with high-level Satanism and certainly high-level people in the Vatican and certainly the Jesuits.
I absolutely agree. And the priests of Rome are not in most cases, in almost all cases, are not ambassadors of the gospel of Jesus Christ. These men are steeped in the occult.
Diane, I just seen that get posted up as well, that Kenneth Copeland one. I might finish with that.
These men are ambassadors of the mysteries and of these other pagan religions that were co-opted under Rome. And so it is a natural progression, I believe, for some of these high-level priests to have interaction and even cooperation with other occult leaders, regardless of whether or not they're Satanists or whether they're involved in the different occult lodges across the earth. Because at the end of the day, it is a Luciferian system, and so it's a natural collaboration in my mind, but it is shocking. And but by the way, Malachi Martin also reveals that to be the case in great detail. And he lamented the fact that there was a Luciferian faction, a very strong Luciferian faction, a very powerful Luciferian faction, an influential faction within the Vatican. And so, if you take all the corroborated and correlating information from guys like Leo Zagami, who are kind of on the outside looking in, and then guys like Malachi Martin, who are on the outside and who were revealing some of the secrets, and then you take the people who have come out of the Illuminati family, some of whom were murdered after saying what they said, and you put it all together, you get a mosaic of this idea that I said earlier, that the Vatican seems to be the epicenter of occult power on earth. That the rituals that are being conducted at the highest levels are in many cases happening there, and are involving some of their top priests and exorcists or other clergy that are again operating at the highest levels of the Vatican. So it is a shocking revelation, but if you look at it in terms of the mysteries, that these are mystery adepts, whether they're wearing the cloth of Rome or whether they're coming from the Order of the Eastern Star. These are mystery adepts. These are the mystery school adepts. They're a brotherhood, regardless. And that's their first allegiance, is to the mysteries. They're secondarily, they're priests of the bishops and priests and cardinals of the Holy See. That's a secondary function. First and foremost, they're ambassadors of a Luciferian doctrine.
Yeah, and we've seen Freemasonry and the Vatican, as you say, they've tried to maintain the narrative for a long time, and they've both done this because they want to determine the conclusion of this whole thing. But I just really thank you for that, and I'll let Brother Hall get to some of the questions in the chat. It's just fantastic and groundbreaking, the things you brought to light, and we just can't say enough about how much we appreciate it. But I know Brother Hall's got.
I'm surprised they are so much on the Catholics, because John and David, they don't talk much about that now. And this is 8 years old. But gee, aren't they exposing the Catholics?
Questions lined up there from the chat, so I'll let you get to it there, Brother Hall.
I'm glad you said you're gonna stick it out there, Tim, because there's they've been lining up. We got a really smart audience. They do their research and they ask really good, intelligent questions. First one comes from Diana, wanting to ask Timothy. This is a perfect question for him. I've been trying to get an answer today. Somebody else is posting. Let's see. Trying to get an answer today. Let's see if I can find it again. What do you say about the Mayan and the Incan art that seems to depict entities, gods coming through the portal that looks like CERN's LHC?
Well, it's not just the Maya and the Inca. You'll find these kind of pictographs, hieroglyphs all over the earth. Portals opening and entities coming through them, sometimes serpentine entities, sometimes entities that look like gray aliens or other, Bigfoot, things like this. So this is something that's certainly not exclusive to these pre-Columbian civilizations. But the Maya,
he's playing dead. Look,
the Aztec, the Maya, the Inca, the Olmec. They are all very similar.
Check him out.
In terms, not only genetically similar, they're also very similar in terms of their mythology, in terms of their gods. And they all have legends concerning deities that either came through portals or came up, for example, in the case of Viracocha, in one of the primary gods of the Inca. He came from up out of the abyss of beneath Lake Titicaca. And of course, the idea of entities coming up from the abyss is also found prominently in a Sumerian legend and in the Mesopotamian legends at large. So this idea of entities coming through portals, perhaps that are, opening up the abyss, as in the case of the Sumerians, or if they're coming from somewhere else, coming through some kind of Stargate portal. In terms of the connection with CERN, I don't know. I'm not 100% sure, and I'm not 100% sure, and I can only guess at what the end game of CERN is, and CERN's ability to actually create one of these kinds of portals. I have no idea. I do know, and to this day, I don't think it has been debunked that within CERN, there are these very strange glass panels that have greetings written on them, some of them greetings in different ancient languages, such as in Sanskrit, ancient Hebrew, and other ancient languages. So it would appear that somebody is expecting to make contact with something utilizing the large
This is 8 years old, guys. So imagine how far ahead they are now.
Hadron Collider, and if you watched, I forget what exactly they were inaugurating the other month when they built that tunnel, and they were doing that inaugural dance. Certainly, it was depicting non-human things coming out of the tunnel. And I think you guys know what I'm talking about. I don't remember what the video was called or what the ceremony was called, but there were a lot of world leaders there.
It was the Gothard Tunnel event.
Right. And so they're depicting these grotesque non-human creatures emerging from this tunnel that they built. Now, people say, oh, that's just symbolic, blah, blah, blah. Well, they have to understand that symbolism is the language of the occult. It's the language of the occult. So you can't ignore symbolism. And so all we can know is what we're shown. And by all intents and purposes, what we're shown from CERN is in many cases, very strange occultic symbolism, and what appears to be very intentional symbolism, such as the statue of Shiva, which was bequeathed to them from representatives of India's government. But nonetheless, they allow these ideas to persist, and they not only do they allow them, but they encourage them, which is evident in, for example, the occultic dance Symmetry, which was filmed inside of the Large Hadron Collider, partly filmed inside of the Large Hadron Collider. So yes, there's something very occultic about CERN. Are they trying to create a portal through which to open the abyss, maybe in a way reminiscent of the Tower of Babel, Enki, and so forth from the Sumerians? I don't know. I am inclined to think that they are doing something along those lines.
Excellent. We had a show, David was on True Frequency Radio with us today, and we were talking about CERN, and he brought something up. We were talking about the basilisk in the Bible and its description. And I'll let David elaborate, but, John and I did a show a couple months ago on the Little Green Men, about the general talking about the Little Green Men, and this came up that there was a weasel that stopped up CERN. I think it was about a month, 2 or 3 months ago, and David made a connection today, and I'll let him elaborate just a little bit on that. That just boggled my mind. Go ahead, David.
Well, in Isaiah 59:5, the Lord makes the accusation against Israel in the 8th century BC that they were in cockatrice eggs. And if you would look that up in the Keelan-Delitzsch commentary or in the Webster's dictionary, this refers to the basilisk. And the basilisk was this legendary creature, which I don't believe is legendary, just like these other creatures that the Word of God talks about. I think they're real and the product of genetic corruption. But in the legend of the basilisk, the only way that it could be killed was either by seeing its own reflection in a mirror or a weasel. And there were numerous accounts down throughout the centuries of people that would catch weasels to put down basilisk holes. So now we have CERN, which is openly and admittedly dedicated to bringing entities through dimensional doors. And now we see a weasel stopping CERN. Now, I just believe that the Lord is telling us something, Harold. I absolutely do.
That could be occult messaging too, because people have to understand that the adepts of the mystery schools communicate with each other publicly. They communicate with each other through the news, through movies, and using the coded esoteric language and symbolism. So I had not known that, David. That is extremely intriguing.
Yeah, and you can study that word cockatrice, and you are on firm ground there in relating this to the basilisk, and it's just absolutely mind-blowing. And the basilisk was the top of the food chain of the most deadly of these mythological creatures. And I think literally we called the broadcast this evening The Return of the Basilisk. And I think literally that's what we're saying.
I thought it was highly interesting. Speaking of messaging and control, somebody wants to get your take on, is the Vatican in control of the Smithsonian Institute, in your opinion?
I don't know if they're in control of the Smithsonian Institute. In the beginning, the Smithsonian Institute it seems that their primary occupation was to prop up the claims of Darwinism and to protect and to promulgate the theory of evolution. So it could be that in the beginning, their primary, occupation was to proselytize the evolution of species and to bury any kind of evidence that would go contrary to the theory of the evolution of species. By the way, just to throw out a little bit of information concerning our next film, we are actually tracking down some very high level potential whistleblower kind of people that were involved with the Smithsonian. And I can't say any more than that, but our part of our desire is to blow that thing wide open in the next installment of our series.
I do know on Gen 6, if they go to your YouTube channel, you do talk about the Smithsonian Institute at length. I mean, you do mention it quite often that they're about their cover-up. So if you haven't checked it out, please go and do that. So I'll move along. I guess this is to both of you guys, David and Timothy. Who is Herman Biff, and what is his legend all about?
Go ahead, David.
Great question.
Hiram Abiff is the character in the third degree of Freemasonry, and every Master Mason, when he's initiated into the third degree, he plays the part of Hiram Abiff. And they bring him in, and they will tap him on the head with a setting ball, and they'll push him back, and they'll catch him in a canvas. And sometimes in Europe, they'll put him in a coffin. But then the master, the worshipful master, will raise him to the perpendicular upright position with the strong grip of the lion's paw, and they will whisper the secret Masonic word, Maha Bon, in his ear. And Hiram Abiff goes back to the legend of Nimrod and Semiramis. The mysteries begin there. And when Nimrod died, miraculously, Semiramis became pregnant and had Tammuz. And Tammuz was worshipped as Nimrod reincarnated. And in Ezekiel 8:14, we see in scripture about the women weeping for Tammuz, worshiping the dying god. And the dying god of the mysteries, and this was worshipped in connection with the equinoxes and the solstices, and this is where the pagan holidays, which Rome implemented and embodied into their system, comes into play. And in different countries, the dying god in Egypt was Osiris, in Rome it was Bacchus, the Dionysian mysteries, and Hiram Abiff in Freemasonry. And if you look really at what the Catholics are saying about the Eucharistic Jesus, this is not the Jesus of Scripture. This is just another version of the dying God. And this is the great connecting factor between both Freemasonry and Catholicism, is that they are both devotees of the mysteries, and this is their mutual concern for rewriting history. And the Smithsonian, and this is something L.A. Marzulli also talks a lot about, and it's just a fact that from the beginning to now, the Smithsonian has been a Masonically controlled organization. And we can see these two groups that are both devoted to the mysteries, both, as Timothy puts it so well, so interested in maintaining the narrative. So
that's right. And I think people might find it surprising to hear that at the highest levels of our intellectual institutions, whether they be religious or secular, at the highest levels, the intellectuals sitting on the boards over these institutions or in the Curia at the Vatican do not believe in the evolution of the species, do not believe in Darwinism, although they propagandize the rest of the world with Darwinism. They themselves do not subscribe. They themselves are subscribed to a much more sinister version of history, which is Luciferianism. They take the Bible and they turn it upside down. That's what, basically, in a nutshell, what Luciferianism is. And so these guys, it's amazing because if you watch Richard Dawkins or the late Christopher Hitchens arguing in favor of evolution, and these guys, of course, have no concept of the mystery schools or the real power players, the priests of power on the earth, you'll watch these guys debate and make the case that it is the highest intellectuals on earth believe in Darwinism, the evolution of species. That is patently false. The guys with the most knowledge, the adepts of the mysteries, who are in possession of true history, subscribe to Luciferianism, not the evolution of species and Darwinism. So I absolutely agree that behind the scenes of the Smithsonian, you're dealing with the same kind of characters, the same adepts, the same brotherhood as you are with any other occult society, secret society, Illuminati. You're dealing with the same controllers of society. They want us to believe that we evolved, and what a better way to hide the truth of the past. I mean, I can think of no better way to hide and cover up. You don't even need to go and confiscate bones anymore. All you need to do is get people convinced that the further you go back in time, the dumber the human race is, until we actually devolve into apes. The further you go back, and the truth is that we are devolving now. We're not evolving, we're devolving. We are devolving from Adam, and that's the glorious thing. One of the glorious things about the gospel of Jesus Christ is that he remedies that, and that will be remedied for the believers in the resurrection. But we are devolving. So keep that in mind for the listeners when you hear these intellectuals proselytizing the evolution of species, Darwinism, thinking that they are the cream of the intellectual crop. They're nothing more than puppets for the power, for the true power base, and the adepts of the mystery schools who are Luciferian.
And something else that was fascinating that came out in the documentary, that instead of opposing the ideas of Zecharia Sitchin, that Balducci, the Vatican exorcist, he was very much on board with Sitchin's ideas, and just amazing.
And they were passing back and forth artifacts in a mysterious box that Gian Mario Ferramonti was the carrier of this box, transporting these artifacts, and he was not allowed to open the box, between Zecharia Sitchin in New York and Corrado Balducci at the Vatican. And so there was a very real collaboration between those two individuals.
I definitely would have opened the box.
Love to have a peek at that.
This is a wonderful conversation, guys. Wonderful.
Yeah, I agree.
The mic has just dropped. You guys just got a whole bunch of truth right there. I hate to move on to the next one because I want to keep this conversation going, but I'll move it along. This one goes to Gen 6. How can you tell if there is more underground from the outside of the buildings? Any specific clues that you look for?
Generally speaking, if you are dealing with a very ancient construction, especially if it's megalithic, almost in every case, if it's megalithic, there's going to be something underneath it. As Steve Quayle is fond of saying, it's not what's above the ground, but below the ground that really matters. And he has had military personnel who've actually been in some of these underground constructions confirmed to him that always look underground when dealing with these ancient constructions. So ancient constructions, I can tell you, megalithic constructions for sure. You're going to find, I'm going to say boldly, that in every case where you find Cyclopean megalithic constructions, you're going to find an underground component.
Excellent. This one's for Timothy. Is there any truth to the idea that the Vatican has created Islam, as some defect Jesuit claims?
I don't know. I have a feeling David could probably answer that question better than me.
Well, I know I had a conversation with Rob Shiva, and Rob recommended a video with a fellow by the name of Walter Veith, who he said put forth a very compelling argument for the fact that the Vatican did create Islam. I haven't seen it, so I can't really speculate to that either. But I do know that Rob.
I know 100% the Vatican created Islam. I know that 100%.
Would be the guy
it's in my OSD code.
To ask about that. There are people that do believe that, but as to being able to speak to that myself, I can't.
Okay, so we'll move right along. We'll ask Rob when he comes on next Friday, see what he says to that one, David.
You can
Oh, yeah. Cott asked, what will happen to, I guess this is to both of you, what will happen to all the deceived, well-intentioned people out there that are devoted Catholics? Are they saved or have potential to lose their salvation? I have Catholic friends. They are good people. I worry about them.
Well, that depends on what your view of the Catholic Church is. I personally believe that the Church of Rome is at least one facet of Mystery Babylon. I think she is the woman that rides the beast for numerous reasons. I think she fits the bill better than any other institution, organization, nation. Nobody fulfills the requirements for Mystery Babylon as laid out in the book of Revelations better than Rome in my eyes. So, because I view the Catholic Church, the Church of Rome, as Mystery Babylon, at least a facet of Mystery Babylon, I think that as believers, we are...
So I've run out of time to play that now. I'm going to play that tomorrow if that's okay. That Kenneth Copeland one. I've been going over nearly 3 hours now, and that's usually my limit. Because I get in trouble off the missus if I go longer.
Are mandated to come out of her. Now, there's something that is encouraging in that mandate, and that is that there are believers that are inside of whatever Mystery Babylon is. So there's hope. There's believers in there, and they're being instructed to come out. So if indeed I am correct in speculating that the Church of Rome is the woman that rides the beast, then there are believers, Catholics, who believe in the gospel of Jesus Christ, who have not subscribed to the deeper heresies of Rome, and don't know any other form of the gospel except for that which has been put forth from Rome. And even though it has been put forth and has even though it has been poisoned, even though the well is poisoned, they've received enough of the gospel to believe it and to receive Christ. And I think the admonition at this point is come out of her.
Yeah, I would agree. I wholeheartedly believe that Rome is religious mystery Babylon, and nobody is going to be saved by believing what the Church of Rome teaches. They don't teach the gospel. They teach a sacramental salvation through obedience to the church and baptismal regeneration. But in spite of that, there are people within Catholicism that do love the Lord, that do believe in the real Jesus, and I believe they're genuinely born again. And I would wholeheartedly agree that for those Catholics that do love the Lord and are born again, you need to get out. This thing is getting very, very late. It's getting very, very scary, the things we're seeing, and you really do need to get out of it. And I would say the same thing to people that are in non-Catholic churches that are also thoroughly apostate. And we talk a lot about this too. And I think we're at the point in time where our religious institutions have failed us, and the institutions of man are something that we can no longer trust. And we just need to come out of Babylon and serve the Lord without fear and without compromise. And indeed, that's what we're seeing thousands of people doing.
Amen. Amen. And the next question follows up with what you guys were just talking about. Please elaborate. This is from YouTube. Please elaborate more on the Jesuits, as they are the key to everything. Are they the whore of Babylon, as written in the book of Revelations? Can I get your take on that?
I think that the Jesuits are one facet of the institution of Rome. They have been traditionally, they have been historically the strongest, most influential faction inside of the Vatican. But since the 60s, there's been an insurrection in the Jesuit order, and they have pulled away from the authority of the Pope. They created and then began to widely subscribe to liberation theology and mingle themselves in the socio-political workings of nations and against the will of the Pope, by the way, and have helped to steer the church, the Catholic Church, away from its traditional roots and into an amalgamation of belief systems into a one world religion, which is ultimately where they are steering the Catholic Church. By the way, I have it from the guys in Rome that the installment of Pope Francis was a coup by the Jesuits against Ratzinger, and basically there was a different guy that was supposed to be the Pope, I think it was supposed to be Pietro Bertoni, who was the Secretary of State under Ratzinger, under Benedict. And what people need to understand about the Vatican at this point is that there is a very influential gay lobby within the Vatican. In fact, Bertoni is referred to as the Pink Pope in Rome, the leader of that gay faction, the homosexual faction inside of the Vatican. And the Jesuit insurrection has culminated, and it's been for years, since the 60s, has culminated in the installment of Francis, of Bergoglio. He is a hardcore communist who has himself been involved in very nefarious operations, political operations in South America. And so, politically speaking, the Jesuits are commies. But it goes deeper than that. Behind the scenes, spiritually, religiously, they are the students, the followers of Teilhard de Chardin, who was very influential in the New Age movement in the United States and all over the world, whose belief is absolutely not in alignment with traditional Catholic dogma, and who has been rejected in the higher echelons of Rome in terms of the official doctrine of Rome. He's been rejected as a heretic, but because of the influence of the Jesuits, they refused to let him go. He's one of their great heroes, and so his doctrine has infiltrated the Catholic dogma, and that is the true religion of the Jesuits at this point. So politically, they're communists, and religiously, they are adepts of the teachings of Teilhard de Chardin. So if you put those two things together, what you have is an organization that is actively working towards the destruction of traditional Catholicism and the rise of a new religion. That's really what's at the heart of this. It is a destruction of the old, and it is the birth of something new. It is the phoenix burning into its ashes and rising anew. And that is what the work of the Jesuits is at this point. It should not be taken lightly, this Jesuit coup installing Pope Francis. Again, when you look at him, politically speaking, you're seeing a communist, a globalist, who wants to bring about a one world government. Religiously, when you look at him, understand that his doctrine and the doctrine of the Jesuits is not traditional Catholicism. It is a new form of spiritualism that is headed for a one world religion.
When you look at the world powers and you look at President Obama, it's the same ideology. You know, he's going to transform America.
Exactly right.
Do you see them working in tandem?
Absolutely. Oh, by the way, let me say this. You know, everybody's focused on Hillary Clinton right now and her ailing health, which I believe she is. She's wasting away before our eyes, in my opinion. I don't believe it's about Hillary Clinton. I believe she's the vector. She is there to install the guy behind her into the White House. She is there to install into the White House Tim Kaine. He is an unknown. He does not have enough notoriety himself to run for president. She does. She is carrying him into the White House. I believe that perhaps even she is not expected to last very long if she becomes a president. I believe he will be. If Hillary Clinton becomes a president, we will get Tim Kaine. Tim Kaine is admittedly a Pope Francis Catholic. Those are his words. And he is Jesuit trained. As far as I know, he's not a Jesuit himself. Very closely associated with the Jesuits. So I expect if Hillary Clinton is elected as president, it's not about Hillary. It is about
Good night, Phil. God bless, mate.
I guess you can call it a Jesuit coup in the United States. And it is to put a man in the White House to be in alignment with Pope Francis, not only for the amalgamation of the nations under one world government, but for the amalgamations of the religions in a one world religious system. So
yeah, I'm out too, guys. I've been going, how long have I been going? 3 hours, so I'm out too, guys. God
well, I
bless
think people need to
everyone.
be aware of that.
Light bulb just went off. I'm going, you're absolutely right. I didn't see it.
That makes a